Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar, a podcast about PC gaming. This is episode 69, it's the 18th of November. I am Tom Francis, and with me here today are...
Graham Smith.
And...
Tom Senior.
And the news this week is... Well, there's lots of news, and this is barely news.
By the time you're listening to this, it won't be news at all.
But Far Cry 4 is out. Dragon Age Inquisition is also out today, but I haven't played that yet. So, Far Cry 4 is newsworthy because A, I'm really, really looking forward to it, and B, it's like Assassin's Creed Unity, forces you to use Uplay, and that's a pile of shit. And I've already lost all of my progress in the game due to Uplay. So I was playing earlier, and it was only half an hour's progress. Well, only felt like an hour, and that's a hell of a long time in game progress. Redoing a half an hour that you just did is fucking grueling. But I think it would have happened no matter how far I was, because I've gone through many checkpoints. It wasn't an issue of hadn't reached a checkpoint. It was just lost my save game because Uplay went down while I was playing. And if Uplay is down when you start playing, it will tell you that, and you can play in offline mode. And it's complicated because Uplay has an offline mode, and then Far Cry 4 itself has an offline mode. When you play single player, you have to choose whether you want to play an online single player campaign or an offline single player campaign. And if it's online, then co-op buddies can jump in. And if it's offline, they can't, but you can switch. So if you start an offline and then you want the co-op buddy to join, you could go back to the menu and then resume in online. So I hadn't told Uplay specifically to go offline when I started the game, but I did tell Far Cry to play offline. I was like, no, I don't want to bother about any online bullshit. That could lose me my save game. I'm going to stay offline. And I had to quit at some point. I couldn't quit normally because during cutscenes you can't pause them, you can't get to the options menu, you can't close the game, you can't do anything. You're completely immobilized, and it was doing a really long cutscene, and I need to close the game down, so I just alt F4'd it. And when you do that, I've done that before actually, and it worked fine. Uplay pops up with a synchronizing your save game menu, and it didn't do that, probably because Uplay was down, although I didn't really notice. I didn't know that at the time. And then when I tried to play it next, Uplay was down, so okay, play in offline mode, and I was set back to the start of the game. Woo! And then when Uplay eventually came back online, I was able to play online, both on Uplay and in the game, and my progress was still completely lost. So, just deleted my save game! So if you are going to play Far Cry 4, I haven't totally verified that this is reliable yet, but in Uplay you can go to settings and you can disable cloud saving, and you can also set it to always start in offline mode, which just means you don't have to think about it again. Even if they update it, I think it won't even know about it because it will be stuck in offline mode. And then obviously play the game in offline mode as well. Surely that would at least not delete your save game.
It seems like the point of cloud saves is to back up your saves and make it easier to transfer between the computers. I don't remember before cloud saves ever losing my save game. Them just being deleted accidentally wasn't a thing that used to happen.
I remember I lost when transferring hard drives, I was thinking about all the data I needed to back up, and it wasn't until months and months after I'd done that I suddenly thought, Diablo! All of my Diablo 2 characters. Oh, no. I didn't copy them across, and so those are they're save games, but they're also characters, level 35 Necromancer and stuff, which represents hundreds of hours of play. And that was briefly heartbreaking, but it's telling that I didn't notice for 3 months, and to be honest, I might never have actually wanted to play as them ever again. It just feels like they have value in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I change hard drives, it's normally kind of a cataclysmic event, because I have no intention of actually going through all the shit on there and actually finding out what I need to back up or don't. So I always just delete my entire life and restart it whenever I buy a new hard drive. And then just kind of see how it goes. And I'm still here. I'm still registered to pay tax and things. So it's okay, I think.
The council people don't come round.
It's fine.
I had problems, so I've been playing Far Cry 4 a little bit as well today, and I'm enjoying it so far, but my first experience was just spending 2 hours getting it to work.
No, really?
Because when I first started it, I would get the Far Cry 4 logo splash screen, and then it would launch the executable, and it would just remain on a black screen, and nothing would happen, and then when I would click, Windows would tell me that it was no longer responding. And it turned out that it had nothing to do with Uplay. It was that I had my HOTAS flight stick plugged into my computer, Apparently, this is a
Rookie mistake.
No,
destroying my dream of piloting an elephant as if it was a fighter jet. But apparently, this is a common problem with Ubisoft games where. I looked it up and I found a whole bunch of people having the same problem, and the solution was always remove your Bluetooth drivers, update your USB drivers, or unplug all your controllers. And hostess flight sticks were one of the things that came up a lot. Apparently it's a common thing with Ubisoft games where it causes them to just not boot in some indiscriminate way.
Imagine if this happened with a board game. You're playing chess, but then chess breaks because there's a sparrow in a different place outside. It's like just arbitrary shit around you is slightly different to how the game wants it to be.
After that, though, it all worked fine, and I've played a whole bunch and I've saved it and I quit it. I haven't booted it up again since. So maybe my save games have gone as well. But so far it seems very much like Far Cry 3, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
And also it's gorgeous.
That came up a bit in previews and in reviews of as a criticism is like, it's not really that different enough, or like some people say it could be accused of being just an expansion pack. And I was like, an expansion pack? Fucking awesome! That's fantastic. Like Far Cry 3, the story missions were shit and the story itself was shit, but almost everything else was awesome, and in particular the outpost missions, which I've raved about again and again on this podcast. So just like, if I get that stuff again, fucking brilliant.
So when the game starts, like how much of it is just intro, kind of people monologuing at you and stuff?
So there's a 5-minute intro cutscene, which again, one of those figures that doesn't sound like a lot until you sit through 5 minutes of being completely unable to interact in any way, including skipping the scene or even accessing the menu to like turn the volume down or anything. Not allowed any of that, or to turn subtitles on,
or pausing it if you need to get
even if you alt tab away, it carries on playing. There's literally no way to stop it. Can't be stopped. It's an unstoppable cutscene. And I really, really hated that cutscene. I'd seen, I think, almost all of it before in the trailer, but then there's another bit that's even, just as bad, really. It's just one of those things where they just have it's like torture porn and murder porn, and just basically have this guy do hideous, horrible things right in front of you while you can't control your character to make you hate him. But it's just manipulative and shallow and shit, and doesn't work because I don't care. He's a fucking video game pantomime idiot. I in no way believe in him as a character or give a shit. And so all you really did was just show me a bunch of really nasty, horrible shit to try and exploit me, and it didn't work. Then when the game actually starts, there's another overly long conversation before you're allowed out, and then one little scripted drive past some people who are shooting at you. But then the actual that's all over in the first 7 minutes of the game. And then once they start to actually do the tutorial stuff of here's how you do stealth, here's how you throw a rock, here's how you throw bait to attract bears, that stuff is all in basically semi-open environments, like sort of wide ravine where you get to kind of choose how you want to go about distracting people and stabbing them. They give you a gun even when they're trying to teach you about stealth stuff, and you can either stab them or shoot them. After the very first tutorial bit, there seemed to be 2 different routes I could have gone to get past the next set of enemies, and then after that is a mini outpost, and there's 5 different enemies and a leopard. And Graham, you were saying you just walk past the whole thing.
Just walk past the outpost. Your aim at that point is to escape, and so I think it was probably going to teach me some more stealth mechanics than I'd already learned. But I played Far Cry 3, so I like that I could just sneak past the tutorial.
Yeah. So coming to that after playing Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which actually I didn't, on the whole, I didn't dislike. I quite enjoyed it. But the way that game fucking just brutally punishes you for even turning round, it will just kill you on the spot. Or if you just you're following a guy, but you didn't follow him. You went too far to the left when you're following him. It says, leaving the mission area, I'm going to cancel the whole mission if you don't get back on track. And just pointless shit. In some cases you can kind of understand they couldn't be bothered to make the rest of the level, they don't know what would happen if you went over there. And then in other cases it's just, Jesus Christ, you didn't pick up exactly the right weapons, they just fail you, or just anything unexpected just aborts the whole game. And so this is a breath of fresh air. And even though the fact that I lost those 8 games, it's absolutely dismal and pathetic that it happened, and Uplay is clearly a worthless piece of shit. But I'm not with any other game, it would just be if that happened with Call of Duty, I'd just I'll never play this game, and I'll probably never play any Call of Duty games ever again. But with this, I did I'm way more interested in actually the game itself, so there's a bigger carrot. But also replaying that stuff, I need a break before I can do it. But it won't be that hellish. It'll be like, I've got to sit through that conversation again. But then when I'm actually playing, I can do it a different way. I can try. Last time I stabbed everybody, I did it perfectly stealthily. This time I'll try shooting them. Those are the two options, so I get to try the other one. Or I could waste all the bait that they give you and try just summoning bears to everybody. So you can... I haven't got far enough. Maybe you can tell me, Graham, whether this works, but bait is basically a new grenade type, and it's a piece of meat. When you throw it, it attracts wildlife. And it seems... I don't think that it necessarily attracts wildlife that was already being simulated wandering around the emergent natural world. Right. I think it actually just spawns a bear behind the nearest tree, and the bear jumps out and kills everybody.
It's certainly in that tutorial, that's the way it works with that bear, because the place that the bear comes from, you just wear. Right. There wasn't a bear there.
But then, so I summoned a bear, and then it killed 2 guys, and surprisingly a 3rd guy killed it. They were all firing at it the whole time. And then, so I killed him, and then I looted the bear, which causes you to skin it, and you get the bear pelt, and then you also get some meat, and the meat is the bait you throw. So I've got my bait back, basically. So can I just throw this bait at the next group of enemies, and then just keep cycling this forever? Is there an infinite bait economy?
That's awesome.
I like that every time... Like, first of all, there's something weird about the setup for this game, because it felt like in Far Cry 3... I understood my character's motivations. You crash on this island, all your friends are in a cave, and you're trying to get everyone off the island.
We've all been there.
Yeah, you're cave friends. And in that kind of setup, I understand what my personal motivations are. But I think games work really well when it's just get out of this place. Like Half-Life 1, for example, just works really well because it's about escaping Black Mesa.
Yeah.
Far Cry 4, you've willingly gone to this place to scatter your mother's ashes. But then it turns out that everyone knows you, but it's not really explained why. And I know why from having read pre-release materials and watched all the trailers and that sort of stuff, but the game doesn't really communicate that. And now I'm just going about doing stuff without really any sense of who I am, where I've come from, or why I'm doing any of these things, because none of it is helping me scatter my mother's ashes. That's where I need to do.
Still in my pocket. I just switch the grenade type. Take aim.
Yeah, because your mother comes and attacks anyone by guns.
I don't even know if I'm carrying it anymore, because it's like in the cutscene at the start, the pagan men takes the cap off and like licks a little bit of your mother's ashes.
That was one of the disgusting, horrible things that I was supposed to sit through.
Does he have it now? Did he give it back to me? Is it in my backpack?
Because he just leaves the room. And I don't think he's carrying anything when he does. And then you're basically free, that's when the game starts. You can
maybe it was just on the table and I
maybe we both forgot it. Well, luckily I got to replay the whole game, so I can do this.
I feel like there's, first of all, no sense of what I contain as a human being. Like, my bag is just a menu. No one gives you a bag or gives you, And the fact that at the start of the tutorial that you can just walk up to that bear, pull out a knife, slit it open and pull out the meat. Who am I? And as you do this and you pick up the meat, your character kind of goes, ugh, and sticks it in a bag. First of all, what bag do I have which is just full of raw meat? And why am I doing this?
But why are you so adept at skinning bears and yet so disgusted by the act that you become obviously accomplished at?
As I understand it, didn't you leave Kirat when you were 5 and have been living in America ever since?
Yeah.
So it's not like you grew up here or anything in any meaningful way that would give you skills to survive or make it natural to do so.
And everyone knows your name, and you're apparently the son of someone who's very well known, presumably a former leader or something like that, which is fine. But your character just goes along. So you get rescued by these rebel fighters, and then immediately start volunteering to do jobs like climb radio towers to turn off propaganda for them. And it's like within half an hour, after I've hunted and skinned a dozen animals, made myself a fetching purse, I'm going down zip lines from radio towers and scaling buildings, and I'm hang gliding off cliff tops.
Sounds awesome.
And then I'm doing a favour for a woman, which is to do a favour for an old woman, which is to go to a nearby cave and kill all the wolves that are inside because they're threatening her pig farm. And I'm crawling through the cave firing explosive arrows at red barrels in order to kill the wolves, to help the old lady, to help the young lady that's part of the rebel fighters. And I'm thinking, well, when do I scatter my mum's ashes? Why am I doing this?
You found the most video game.
I'm having a lot of fun, but it sounds like they just had a completely different setup and then just like snuck Far Cry 3 into that thing. And all I can think of is, the Louis C.K. bit about, people want you to go scatter their ashes when they're dead. He's not fucking doing that shit. He's not doing errands for you after you're dead. You don't matter anymore. And every time I, snap my broken wrist into position, I'm like, does my mum really want this that badly? Doesn't she know?
So there must be an inevitable press F to scatter ashes somewhere in this game. So. At the end, maybe. I kind of... do you need justification when you're in the sandbox properly and you're just kind of fucking around? Is it?
Well, it's always wildly discordant with what you're there to do. Like Far Cry 3, it was... Because, like you say, you're meant to escape, but then it was full of fun activities. It was a massive playground, and you went around trying to make a better wallet for yourself so you could carry more money. And they had characters comment on that. Like, your girlfriend at one point says, "Look at you, you're covered in tattoos, you're carrying like 19 weapons, who are you?" And unfortunately you don't get the option to say, "I'm a video game protagonist, we all look like this."
I think it's interesting because Far Cry 2 tried to turn that existential malaise into a plot point where, you're this purposeless mercenary and you spread, horrible death and destruction for vague profit and for no real motive, and that's kind of an indictment of that way of life and those systems in those countries. And I just love how the game since have kind of kept fragments of that without actually understanding at all what Far Cry 2 was trying to do, and then replicating it in just bonkers scenarios and then adding mushroom trips and things to it and barrels and things.
I will say that Far Cry 2, I was a horrible asshole, and all my friends were horrible assholes, and we had to just do things that just destroyed the local country and just made it terrible for innocent people, which I didn't like. Far Cry 3, I was a jerk tourist who came in and just tried to be the saviour of all the local people and get all of their cool magic shit and then do everything myself. And this is the first one where I don't actively hate my character yet. I just came here to do a kind of sweet thing, and like I say, I don't know why I haven't left yet, but I don't hate myself.
I do wonder how much is just, they got criticised for both Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3 rightfully for the ambitious thing they were trying to do in terms of meta commentary not working, and whether this time around they've just gone, let's not do it. Let's stop commenting on things. It doesn't matter why you say yes to every random job that everyone around wants to give you. And to be honest, a lot of the time I am just hang gliding off beautiful mountains, looking at alpine snow and glades and rivers, and it's fun hunting the animals and turning them into purses.
Do you think they'll ever do one where the plot is you show up and then you're like, oh cool, there's fun stuff to do here, and you just do the fun stuff?
Like, if it let you skip cutscenes, you could make that game for yourself by just skipping the cutscenes and just being that guy. But no, apparently not.
That'd be a good fan edit you could do or something, because there is an intro cutscene in which you arrive by bus and you have your passport with you and stuff, and there's a brief audio log about you being there to scatter your mother's ashes, and you could just cut from there to the first moment you're actually in control, forget all the intervening stuff.
There's some brilliant mods for both Fallout 3 and Baldur's Gate 2 before it, which just skip the opening dungeons, the tedious opening RPG dungeon that kind of teaches you the world and the mechanics and stuff, and just plops you out there and, it's just go and have a game world. And I wish that, that would solve so many games. Just skipping the first half an hour of a game would just make that game better, I think, like most games.
There was something special about coming out of that sewer in Oblivion and going out to the open world for the first time. People complained a lot about that sewer bit, that you had to that it was long and dark and dingy and very stereotypical when the game itself had a lot more to offer. But that did make the moment where you switched from one to the other a really cool moment to just go, whoa, this is actually a way bigger thing than it seemed. But that was also a good thing. The problem that people said they had was that it was long, but it was an RPG in which they were going to let you do basically anything, and so that they wanted to teach you about stealth and about magic and about combat and make sure you did all those things before you leave. And then when you leave the sewer, you get a chance to change your character if you want. So if you just had a really good time with magic and you started as a thief, you could say, actually, must be a mage instead. So it kind of made sense there.
Yeah.
I guess the classic problem with Bethesda RPGs is just that the main plotline never feels that critical, so even when the world is apparently in peril, players often don't do it. But I would actually much prefer that to the kind of Far Cry method where the main plot line is intrinsic to your character in some way. Like, if you had just been a prisoner in Far Cry 4 with no idea of what your backstory was and then dropped in that world, that would work. And you could still have, all this stuff with pagan men and a main plot line that carried through that. But could be completely optional. That would be fine.
Are upgrades tied to story missions?
Yes.
No, damn it.
I don't know which ones, do you?
No, I don't know which ones.
Like,
Are they tattoos again?
No, they're pledges to the elephant or the tiger, I think. I think that's how it splits its skills up. And then if you move your mouse to the left hand of the screen, you get a tiger roar. To the right hand of the screen, an elephant go.
Excellent. Well, that settles that.
It's so easy to pick holes in the game and make fun of the plot and stuff like that, but I do want to stress I'm just having lots of fun, and I really liked Far Cry 3.
Yeah, Far Cry 3
I spent a lot of time clicking Ubisoft games for Watch Dogs earlier this year and problems with Assassin's Creed, but Far Cry 4 seems fun.
Have you done an outpost yet? Like a proper one?
No, not an outpost. I've done one of almost all the other main Far Cry things. So I've done a radio tower, I've done a timed delivery mission on a quad bike.
Yeah, I remember those.
I've just got the bow and arrow because that was the wolves thing, so I can now take silent people down, and I've done a whole bunch of animal hunting and crafting stuff, picking plants.
Nice.
How are you free to do what you want now?
Yeah, I'm pretty much right after you get rescued from the palace at the start, and there's that car bit, and then you do the stealth tutorial, and then you get taken to the rebels main town.
Yeah, I think that's just where I got to when I lost all my progress.
At that point you're just completely free to go off to do what you want, or gating aside, obviously the map hadn't fully unlocked, you could do the radio towers and that sort of stuff, but the first room you walk into at that point will tell you to go to a radio tower, and from that point on you can just there's a hang glider there on the side of the mountains, or a zip line.
That's awesome.
And away you go.
That sounds like one of the less offensive beginnings to most open world games. Like, if you think about Assassin's Creed, you've got to wade through fucking hours of bullshit to get anywhere in those games. I gave up when I was a child in Unity. I hadn't even got out of adolescence, so I was still like a 7-year-old boy, and I was like fucking done with this shit. I've got 40 years to go before I get to be the adult.
Yes, I actually, it's a good segue. I reviewed Assassin's Creed Unity for PC Gamer. I gave it a pretty average score because I like Assassin's Creed actually. I kind of I've played all of them and enjoyed their foibles are just kind of part of it for me now in a way. But it turns out when you actually have to review a game, those foibles become severe sticking points. There are bigger problems with the Unity though, in that it's just kind of shoddy in a way that if you have an AMD card or something, it's going to just run like shit.
Did you get the eyes and teeth bug?
I didn't get that actually. I was fortunate because I just upgraded my PC and got a GTX 970 and stuff. So I plugged it in and played it, and it just ran absolutely beautifully. It looks fucking amazing. It looks like I haven't been wowed by a game like I have with that game visually. I haven't experienced a leap like that before. But running at max settings on the GTX 970, that Paris is just exceptional. It's just an absolutely astonishing place. The way it changes from the central area where it's just really super populated. There are just hundreds of NPCs around you all the time, and they're all doing different things. They're either fighting, or they're kind of arguing with each other over stalls, or they're kind of drunks, stumbling over, or they're lovers kissing, and it's just a deluge of humanity they've managed to render using this new technology. But it's just feels like it was shoved out into the world a few months too early before they'd optimised that and got it running on everyone's cards correctly. So the more you play it, the more you see just floating pedestrians in midair. Or, just walk past a lady and she'll just kind of an NPC will bump her slightly into a chair, and she'll glitch into the chair and then just slowly float up to the top of it and then stay there motionless. And, those things just mount up and up. There's a lot of people have had situations where faces have kind of imploded or just vanished, and they're talking to this kind of floating pair of eyeballs and some teeth, and it's just a horrible, disturbing bug that can happen in Assassin's Creed. It's also it's crashed for me a few times, and it would just every hour just freeze for 15 seconds, then resume normally, and then occasionally just freeze. It was a really unusual crash where everyone in the world stopped, but you could still rotate the camera, and just kind of like,
Whoa.
yeah. So it was just as though everyone was stuck in a time warp, and the only way to get back was to just reboot the game.
It's funny because like I've seen loads of videos of the bugs in this game, and a lot of them are weird. A lot of them are like, I mean, disappearing faces is a thing I think I've seen in other games. Like if you have a free camera and you clip through someone's head, sometimes you get that eyes and teeth effect. But then ones where like all the pedestrians in an area will suddenly tilt at 30 degrees. And
there's the karting one where two pedestrians just like skid along the floor, sat down instead of driving go-karts.
I've seen others where they're standing up but they just still slide along the ground at speed. And so it just feels like for that many different things to go wrong, it doesn't feel like they just had this one little niggling fault they didn't have time to fix or didn't realise because they didn't test it on the right video card. It feels like it was a real fucking rush to get this done.
That's the thing. It just felt like it needed like a couple of passes, just massive bug fixing passes before it was like, actually let's help. And also massive optimization is the other thing. So I was lucky to have that card to get full experience of it. And I could see that it's actually quite a good Assassin's Creed game if it's, running correctly. But even if you have like a 7 series, you're going to have like stuttering and just have to put it down to medium and kind of, have terrible kind of performance problems with it. And also the online just doesn't work. So co-op is a big thing about this game, and I was playing with Phil Savage, PC game with Phil Savage, and we like kind of, it was so frustrating. We were like almost having fun, and then things would just break or we'd disconnect. So there's a mission where you have to protect Napoleon from snipers. As he, it's such a cool world. And Napoleon's like going down in his horse-drawn carriage, and there are snipers in windows all along the way, and there are two of us. So I took one side of the street and Phil took the other side of the street. We were like free running across the rooftops and diving in and killing the snipers, and then Phil would get into trouble, and I'd use my wrist crossbow to shoot across the street and take the guy out through the window. Nice. And then the game would crash. Or like Phil would just be disconnected, and I'd be stuck in an empty world with no objectives. All the objective markers would disappear, and then we'd have to restart it. And it wasn't just like connection problems; it was like mission scripting problems. For every single co-op mission I played, it broke in some way. So the target would there'd be a target marker in a general area, but the target himself would not be in the area. Or the target that's supposed to break out and run free later in the mission would run around in circles in an earlier phase of the mission where he was supposed to be tied up waiting for execution. So we'd look at it and activate Eagle Vision, and Phil's like, the target's on the run. And I was like, well, he's supposed to be in the docks, and we're supposed to be assassinating Templars around this area. And then you activate Eagle Vision, and there's this little gold chap just running round and round, and his hands tied behind his back. And he's like, no, that's not supposed to happen. That's not supposed to happen at all. Which is such a shame.
It sounds so much like trying to play one of the Splinter Cell games co-op in 2003.
Yeah. I was just thinking that.
Fucking brilliant co-op. Because, they had really great level design about boosting people up through windows and having different routes and different abilities and that sort of stuff, and it just never fucking worked on PC. It would work if you had the original Xbox and could play it over Xbox Live, but
I think back then you'd always expect people accepted more of that sort of thing, because it's kind of like now if you're paying, I think it's £50 on Uplay or something to buy Assassin's Creed Unity, and that on the box feature just doesn't work. It's just unacceptable, basically. It's just unacceptable. And it's not just that. It's like, even if you excuse all of the connection problems and all of the glitches and the kind of the bugs and stuff, there are just kind of those systems that they've iterated on for many, many years now, for like 7 or 8 years, are just getting more and more rickety the more stuff they add to them. The free running systems and even the new combat system they've come up with. So I think there's a problem with Assassin's Creed's Traversal, where it's based around a library of thousands of set animations, and what they kind of desperately need is a dynamic system like Warfire's, Overgrowth or something like that, where the character is kind of procedurally dealing with the environment instead of just trying to find the right animation for the right particular piece of geometry he's trying to mount. So what you'll get in Assassin's Creed Unity a lot, and this has been in all of the Assassin's Creed games, but because Paris is just so much more geometrically complex than previous games, this happens more often, is that Arno will try and climb something, and he'll just kind of sometimes just pause and kind of shiver in between animations as he climbs up it, and he'll mount a small box or a bollard as though it's the highest point in the world. And there's stuff all over the streets, and if there's just like a tiny thing poking out the floor, like I after a while I learned to just avoid those things. Like you learn to avoid the big problems with the movement system, and you make the game better for yourself. But that's not the fantasy they're selling you with that system.
So he does the assassin's like overlook perch thing.
Yes,
He crouches on top of a
he'll
bollard,
just kind of settle down,
like a hawk.
He's 1.5 feet off the ground.
Does it do the eagle noise?
No, sadly not. But he takes so much coaxing just to get him off that, because rightly, when you're actually on top of the Notre Dame Cathedral, the game wants you to be really fucking sure about your choice when you jump off in a certain direction.
Yeah.
But then it applies that logic to like really low objects, like just ground level objects.
I was watching a stream of Ian Higdon playing it on the Eurogamers channel when it first came out, and it was just live streaming his first experiences with it, basically. And I was like, I think a couple of hours in, and he's running across a rooftop and he sees a hay bale down below, and he runs off the rooftop, jumps towards the hay bale, and his aim is perfect, and the distance is covered by his jump when he lands in the hay bale. But you can tell as he does it, it's not one of those kind of swan dive things, like pre-canned animations. And because it's not that, when he hits the hay bale, even though he hits it, he just crumples on the floor and dies. Because it just wasn't... No, you didn't do the script animation, so you don't get to live.
You have... you can free run up or down now by holding a certain button, so it lets you descend buildings quickly. But when they showed this in the trailer, it was like a beautiful descent down the Notre Dame Cathedral where he's kind of somersaulting and swinging off stuff, and it looks amazing. Whereas in reality, he just jumps off a building to the ground like half the time. And it's also the same command as jump into hay bale. So if you're at the top of Notre Dame Cathedral and you want to just descend to a ledge, and it's a hay bale, even in real view, he would just go fall 200 feet into it. And it's just loads of basic stuff, basic things like that. And because the game is entirely set in, well, not entirely, but almost entirely set in one city, it's kind of... You don't have the amazing sailing adventure pirate stuff of Black Flag. You don't have the brilliant stuff in Brotherhood where you're building like the assassin order around you. There are no distractions from the core systems that are driving it, and that's when the flaws just really, really shine through. And it's just like kind of shonky at this stage. Just it shouldn't be that frustrating to move around that city when that's a big selling point. That's a big part of what you're supposed to be doing in those games. I
tell a lie. I didn't stop at the child part. You look at some point, you're given like your father's watch when you're like a 7-year-old kid, and or maybe like you're 12 or something, and you look at your father's watch, and then it fades to black, and then fades back in, and it says 7 years later, and you're still looking at your father's watch. It's like, holy shit! How long does it take you to read the watch? So I played that far, and then I was just chasing a thief through. I was being chased through the streets, and then I had to chase somebody else, I think, and I found I didn't have the patience for it, and I wasn't hitting any particular problems that I hadn't had before with Assassin's Creed games, but it was just Black Flag. I had to deal with all the usual Assassin's Creed shit of like the controls don't really work that well, and it's always doing this context sensitive thing where it's guessing what you want to do and getting it slightly wrong all the time. There's just like a constant friction to that. Like as you're running around the world, it's just slightly irritating all the time. And when I'm doing that to get on my fucking pirate ship to sail on the seas and then like manage my crew and sing sea shanties and destroy other ships and pick up like which ones I want to raid to get the right resources to upgrade it, and discovering little islands that aren't on the map and exploring them and finding treasure and stuff, I'll go past all that stuff. I don't mind the friction if that's what I'm doing. But then when I play a game where I'm doing that stuff but there's just nothing to look forward to, there's no, it's all stick and no carrot, basically.
I will say that the assassination missions are really good. They've actually paid attention to, like, it's a game about assassinations now. They're trying to take it back to Assassin's Creed 1 and what that was always supposed to be about. And assassinations now put you on a perch overlooking a kind of sandbox area where the target will be, and there are lots of different kind of parts of that area that you can exploit too. There are kind of dramatic assassinations you can do if you find the right way to do them. It's a bit like Hitman Blood Money in that way. You know how there are just kind of glamorous ways to kill your target. You always have to get them up close, but for example, if there's one case where someone's been guillotined and my target was one of the guys kind of administering the guillotining. So I kind of stuck into a cage with the prisoners, and they led me out, and I had my hands behind my back, and then I got to just kill him in close range in front of everyone. And that stuff's really, really cool, and that's definitely where the series should go with its assassination missions. And it was cool to see them return to that idea and setting it in the French Revolution, where there are just so many people you can kill and have that be important.
A lot of people you can kill.
And have that be important, and have that kind of relate to the entire socio-economic fabric of that time is so fragile that killing someone or kind of disturbing it is satisfying and interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a shame. It's a missed opportunity in almost a really cool game.
Given Ubisoft's history, do you think this is stuff that they'll patch and fix, and that in 3 months' time it will be
possibly
good game?
I think they'll definitely patch the bugs up. I think they've been quite hurt by the reaction to that stuff and slightly embarrassed by it. But they can't fix the free running problems, and they can't fix the combat problems, where they've revamped the combat now, so you're not just an unstoppable killing machine, and you're actually fragile now, which is good. It's the correct thing for that game. But the combat system is just like a 2-button parry and hit system essentially, and in a world where Shadow of Mordor has just come out, and combat and that's just instantaneous and satisfying and crisp and so fucking brilliantly vicious in a way that I almost dislike myself enjoying it so much. In a world where that game has just come out, to have Assassin's Creed Unity have this kind of big floppy animations where the guys are just kind of glitching into range in order to execute the right preordained animation. And I've had things where Arno has kind of done a killing blow on a guy, but the guy hasn't actually been enraged. But you see the two sides of the animation play out, even though they're 6 feet apart. So, I always play the giant axe in Assassin's Creed wherever I can. So I always just smashes him with an axe, but the guy just kind of reels and spirals to death several meters away.
I always wondered how in Batman Arkham games and in Shadow of Mordor actually, how do they get this stuff right? Because the glitchy, shitty version of Assassin's Creed does, where people kind of teleport into position.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I know on the code side how that must work. But Arkham Asylum, no matter how much I watch it, I'm like, how are you doing this? How does it look right? Why aren't there any seams in this animation?
And it seems to be something that company is nailed. It seems like Warner Brothers have just parachuted some people or some tech into Shadow of Mordor almost directly from it, because Shadow of Mordor is completely seamless. I've never seen that combat system falter or break.
I can't remember if I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but so one of the things that's really impressive in Arkham Asylum is not only can you have these perfect counter animations for every attack the enemy can do, but also for any combination of 2 attacks, you have a counter that will take care of both of them. And in Shadow of Mordor, they wanted that as well, but they cheated and just had the ghost self come out and do the other counter. So you do one normal counter and the ghost self does the other normal counter. It's that solves the problem.
That's fantastic. I love Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah.
I'm still playing. There's a sandbox mode that I want to try once to beat the story, which is apparently just, here's a load of here's Orc Society, go and do what you want with it.
Yeah, it's not... So that's the bit I'm in now. I wouldn't call it a different mode. It's really just the army has been repopulated.
Okay.
And so you can mess with them. I'm finding... I wanted to carry on messing with it, but I've lost motivation a little bit because... there's just nothing to achieve. There's no goal I can set myself. It's anything is trivial. Even just, I want that warlord to be on my side. Okay, I've done it. And I did for a while. I was trying to set up a sort of cultivate an army that I really like pick my favourite war chiefs and captains who had the best traits and who had really characteristic looks and stuff, and the ones I didn't like, I'd have them kill them. And that was kind of fun for a while, but the trouble is that their traits don't really... I'm not sure if there's some mechanical reason for this or if it's just bullshit, but you know how you get some captains have the combat master trait, which means they literally can't be damaged by your blows in combat. Naturally, I got one of those on my side, and I thought, brilliant, I'll just have him kill all the other captains, because what can they do? It's not like they can summon beasts on you or, use the other inventive methods that you have to use on other captains. But they still take damage in combat. They still get hurt by things. And I never really see exactly what's happened, but just he's halfway dead now. And then after a little while, if you have him get into a really nasty fight, he will just get killed in combat. So, if those traits don't apply universally, then I lose all interest in it. I can't really get excited about having my own little, band of really cool... I basically wanted all of my favourite captains to be the 5 war chiefs, and then, that would be nice. And you can do that, but the idea of picking, I just had this one guy who had the combat master trait and had a bunch of other immunities that made him basically invulnerable to anything. And so I thought it'd just be so good to have him. He was my heavy. Every time I'm having trouble with the captain, I'd just say, you, go and kill him. And then show up and watch the fight happen. But it didn't work out because he just kept getting damaged by it, and eventually he got killed.
Oh.
Just a sad story about a friend who died.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tangent.
It's a shame because Mordor, Shadows of Mordor was kind of blind for being a bit of a rip-off of Assassin's Creed, and yet in reality there's so much that Assassin's Creed could learn from Mordor, not just in terms of the combat but in terms of the way that structure works, like that hierarchical assassinating members of a hierarchy, like that make a great Assassin's Creed kind of structure.
Yeah, it's perfect for that game.
Yeah, but still made me sad because Unity essentially made me disappointed. But if you love game worlds, wait a few months, and if you've got a good PC and you just want to see just a fucking amazing place, then Unity's city is just fantastic, beautiful.
You've been playing something else, haven't you, Graham?
I've been playing, well, speaking of elegant and graceful combat systems...
You had a segue, damn it.
I've been playing NEO Scavenger, which is... Its combat system is a little bit like a turn-based Sumotori Dreams. It is like if the three of us were to keep drinking this vodka, and at the end of this podcast go out into the dark and then try to kill each other with our bare hands.
Yes,
that's what this combat system is like.
Okay.
And that's not the best thing about the game. NEO Scavenger is made by a guy called, I think it's Dan Fedor, who used to work at BioWare on their RPGs, and it's a turn-based post-apocalypse RPG in the kind of Fallout mode. But you don't control a character from an isometric standpoint and move in granular terms. You just move hex squares on an overworld map, and then when you arrive at certain locations you get like a little bit of like 200 words of text description and then different choices, or if you encounter another person you leap into a combat mode where you'll get context sensitive 10 to 15 different choices for what you can do in the next turn. So that's the basic setup, but it's just brilliant in every possible way. For starters, the skill system's really interesting. So you choose your skill system from a bunch of different keywords. So like strong, tough, melee, botany, engineering, electrician, that sort of stuff.
Hiding. I remember this because I did play this once very briefly, like a year ago, and I was deeply amused to see that botany was one of the skills. So I picked botany, and then I was thinking, what other skills do I need? Well, hiding, probably. If I can be a botanist, my other skill should be hiding from all the things I can't deal with because I'm a botanist.
So that's the positive traits you can pick, but did you ever pick any negative traits?
I don't remember.
Basically, you get 4 skill slots, which you can choose positive traits in. But if you're willing to accept a negative trait, you get another positive trait. Yeah. And negative traits might be like making your character myopic, so you can see one less hex grid around you on the map at any given time, and that sort of stuff. Or making you feeble. So, you could, if you wanted to be an electrician and engineer and have all these technical skills, but if you can do that if you're willing to accept just being really shit at fighting. So that's a really cool system. And it turns out, for example, that botany is the most important skill you can take, but I'll get on to that eventually. I could talk about this game all day. But it starts off with you waking up in a cryo facility with no idea what the world is, how you got there, who you are, or anything. You're just wearing a hospital gown and nothing else, and all the machines in the place are kind of broken, and there's this pounding on the door. And your perception of that situation is dependent upon what skills you've taken. So I often go for strong and melee as 2 of my skills, which means I can just fucking beat up whatever's outside, and it's always a dog man. So I just kick the shit out of them, give a guttural roar, and I'm so impressed by my own performance that I go get the CCTV footage of my own fight. And then you can just carry that around. And at that point, you were just wearing a hospital gown, so you can only carry what you can put in your 2 hands. Right. And so I'm walking around with this videotape.
That's fantastic.
But based on what skills you can take, you can do completely different things. So, like, if you've got the electrician skill, then you can go over quickly to a computer terminal and lock the door in order so that it can't be opened. and that sort of stuff. Or if you've taken trapping, then after you've killed the dogman, you can take a bit of broken glass from one of the cryo machines and use that to not just cut the dogman open to meat, but to skin him and get a fur coat. Then that could be like almost your first action is kick the shit out of the dogman, take the video of me kicking the shit out of him, skin him, wear his fur coat. Yes, come on,
you're a monster.
I bet RJ from Far Cry already knows how to do that.
And then after
with the strong melee character, in your other hand, could you carry the video player that people would need to watch the CCTV tape of you beating up this guy so that they can actually see your prowess?
I have encountered situations since where the videotape would have come in handy. You could give it to another character and it would have impressed them about you and it would have got you around certain things.
We're not sure about your combat skills, but we do have this video player. What's your answer? oh, damn, I dropped it like an hour ago.
That's the thing, you do. Because you want to take a bit of broken glass because that's going to be really, really useful for killing things and cutting stuff up. And then your other hand, you want to carry the videotape. But at a certain point, you're just going to be like, well, probably this lighter is going to be more useful to my survival. So you just throw the videotape on the ground and you take that.
For some reason, I really wanted to be Betamax. This image of you like wearing a hospital gown covered in blood and holding a Betamax tape in one hand and a piece of broken glass in the other. If you want to fight me, watch this tape first. And I'll wait with this piece of glass.
So after that point, you're out into the overworld, and it's a permadeath game. So if you die at any point and you're very fragile, you'll die a lot, then you start back in the cryo facility and you're a whole new character, you can pick up your skills again. But the world isn't randomly generated, it doesn't change every time.
Right.
And so there are certain things off the bat that are scripted. So on your first night, you'll always see a glow in the east, off on the horizon. You won't know what it is, but that then appears on your mini map, and it's way off to the right, the very right edge of the extents of your map. During the first time you encounter a town, assuming you haven't skinned the wolf, or the dogman rather, and taken its pelt, you'll always find a sleeping bag. And that's useful because at night time it gets colder and it can rain and that sort of stuff. And you'll need to find a campsite. Campsites are like abandoned buildings and that kind of thing. But you'll get much better quality of sleep if you've got a sleeping bag, for example. You also won't get hypothermia and die. And then it becomes, what you realise is that it seems like a roguelike at first, and it is, but it's a roguelike that's taking place in a totally legitimate Fallout 1 or Fallout 2 style world, in that there are a whole bunch of different factions and cults and different characters and side quests and just a whole world out there to explore that's fixed and scripted and well written, interesting storylines and stuff like that.
Does it get boring to have to redo the same intro bit each time?
No, because that bit in the cryo facility is like 30 seconds and then you're out in the wilds. And the skill system is so flexible that you can build such radically different stories. And then you can go off to the glow on the right and you can get there pretty quickly once you know where it is and know what you're doing. Or you can just go off in a completely different direction. It's so varied that I've played maybe 40 hours of it at this point, and I've seen only a small fraction of the map. And a lot of your earlier experiences of it are marked by your own fragility and the kind of crumminess of your own existence. Like that thing of the hospital gown with a broken glass. Like there are a lot of playthroughs even now where it's just I eat some berries, get gastroenteritis, and shit myself to death. Or just like you don't find any good clothes when you're scavenging, because you find all these abandoned buildings and crumbling warehouses and mobile homes and stuff like that. You rummage through and try and find good stuff, and sometimes you're just desperately looking for water and drinking bottles of water and stuff like that. You don't find any shoes or a hoodie, and so on your second night you just get hypothermia and die in your sleep. Like you exist on this really thin knife edge of life, and everything will kill you. So like the reason you take botany is that your surest source of food is going out into forest or woodland and scavenging for mushrooms and berries. You can always find mushrooms and berries, but if you don't have the botany trait, you won't be able to tell which ones are poisonous and which ones aren't, which is why I shit myself to death a lot.
In France, you can take any mushrooms you find in the forest to the local pharmacy and they will tell you whether they're edible.
That's a clever idea.
So if this was set in France,
you'd be fine. that's a really interesting fact. That's why I have to get stranded in France somehow. Also, the water is poisonous, so it's infected basically.
Okay.
You don't know why. You're waking up and you don't know what the year is. And certainly from the scavenging and stuff like that, it seems like there's been some sort of apocalypse. You don't encounter that many people, and the people you meet sure aren't friendly most of the time. But you don't know what apocalypse it is. What
apocalypse is this?
There are dogmen? Was it a nuclear
zombie,
thing?
radiation? What else? Robots? Sticking them up.
There are things that look a little bit like aliens, but I don't know if they're just like humans with no hair and distended bellies.
Do you get like scraps of meta plot? Like, are you kind of piecing together a story as you're going on, or is it just like
you are through reaching the glow or through finding other locations? You then piece together parts of the world, and so I know much more than I'm letting on because I don't want to spoil things for things. Yeah. But you are totally discovering more, and on each life that past knowledge is really useful to you, and that's how you kind of get better. But then it's so varied that it never becomes repetitive. But so, for example, the water you find is pretty much all infected. You might occasionally find some that's not, if you're lucky, but you've no way of really knowing, and so you want to boil your water, and so you want to take your trapping skill, because that allows you to find some stones and some twigs and make a fire from that. If you don't take that, then you've pretty much got to find a lighter, and if you don't find a lighter on a run, then you're just fucked. You'll just die eventually because you can't boil water. And I've died not just from the poisonous water, but from, say if you take the strong trait, you can then use that when scavenging a building, so that you'll be firmer with the rubble and the locked doors around you and stuff like that, and you might find more stuff as a result. But there is some risk with crumbling buildings that it will cause a cave-in or a collapse. So you can be scavenging, desperately looking for some water, use your strong trait, a roof will collapse, you'll cut yourself. You haven't found a lighter in order to be able to boil any water. So what you do is you tear up your t-shirt to get some dirty rags. Now you're a bit colder, but you've got these dirty rags, you apply that to the wound, but because the rags are dirty, because you couldn't boil them in water in order to sterilise them, you now get poisoned, get a fever, and die. And it's that flimsy edge of life and death. And that carries through to the combat system as well. You will encounter different people, and some of them will just be scavengers like you, and you can try and talk to them, or they'll try and talk to you, and then maybe you can trade and stuff like that. I traded some bullets for a cell phone, which I think from the guy's candour as he walked away was probably me being screwed. I think probably the cell phone was totally worthless. But
was he holding like an empty gun?
No.
Can you give me those?
You do find people with weapons, and if you do then fight them and beat them up, you do sometimes take the gun from them and then discover it's got no bullets in it, and they're holding you just pretending,
wow.
That's
great. Yeah.
But the combat system is just really clumsy and messy, and there is no such thing as like an elegant quick kill. And because your life is so fragile, because like getting a wound, having dirty bandages, and then dying from that, like just a small cut can end your life. You're terrified of getting into conflict with anyone, because even if you kill them, if they hurt you in any way, that can just leave you fucked and you might live for another 4 days, but you might eventually die from the consequences of that. And it goes down to like basically a few seconds of time that you're deciding in the combat. So you can do stuff like charge at a person, which moves you 3 squares towards them, but has a greater chance that you'll just trip up and fall down. And then or you can tackle a person and knock them to the ground, and then if you get up quick enough or roll away from them and then get up before they can lock you on combat where you're on the ground, you can then kick them when they're down. And it's just this kind of flurry of wild punching, kicking, scrabbling at people's eyes. And even if you've got weapons, your weapons are, maybe you get a wrench and that will do the job pretty quick, but a lot of the time it's just, I've got this medium-sized branch. I've got this medium-sized branch and they've got this gun. We're in this dark room and we're both really cold. They're trying to steal my water, and that's how I got woken up. Do I sneak away, in which case I'll leave my sleeping bag behind and that might kill me 3 days from now? Do I sneak towards them and try and beat them to death with a stick if I can find them? Or will they just fire blindly into the dark, hit me in the stomach, and then I'll just have to crumble away anyway and die 4 days later from my wounds? And that's the kind of experience you're having, while at the same time eventually discovering like future cities or I don't want to spoil too much about the kind of main plot line, but yesterday I discovered Zomzoms, a place to eat, which was basically a big warehouse out in the middle of nowhere, which I entered, and they asked me as I walked in the door for something to trade, so I gave them my right shoe, which was the only shoe I had, because I'd only found a right shoe at that point. Right. You can find 2 right shoes and put them on both feet, and then you'll get like debuffs because you're uncomfortable, and then eventually you'll get like blisters and stuff like that. So I gave them my right shoe, and that was enough to get me in the door, and then they asked me spectator or stock.
Oh my god.
I don't know what that means exactly. Spectator?
Yeah, I would go
spectator. Spectator. And they stamp my hand, and I go in, and I'm in the crowd, and there's meat stalls everywhere. I mean, you can pretty much guess where this is going when it's called Zomzoms, and it's meat stalls, and they ask you if you're stock or spectator.
Yeah.
But there are meat stalls, and because you've paid your admission, you get the meat for free. So it's basically like kebab meat. They're slicing it off these things. Push your way to the front, you get this. It's delicious. You love it. There's very few, like, you can capture animals if you've got trapping and cook them and have meat and stuff like that, but it's few and far between. And then the killer death bots come out, and they call out, so it turns out that the stamp on your hand has a number on it, and they call out the numbers, and whoever's got the number stamped on their hand gets put in the pit. You don't get put in the pit, or at least it didn't on my playthrough. Someone else did, and then this death bot comes out, and you watch this really painful, long, clumsy battle between them, and it's all just described in text as this person just runs in circles to try and keep away from the slowly rotating death bot that eventually skewers them against the wall. And then everyone goes nuts and feverish and stuff like that, and you end up being pulled aside by someone, taken out back, and it turns out that they know of you, and you don't know quite how, but one of the guys who's building these death bots out the back, he's like a mechanic, has heard of some equipment at an abandoned military base somewhere else on the map and wants you to get it for you. But this is a game that you can play for like 20 hours and think is purely just a game about scavenging mobile homes, looking for plastic bags in order to keep your VHS tape inside, and just dying repeatedly in the woods. And so when you switch from that point of, fucking hell, this isn't just this kind of dynamic survival sim, this is a proper Fallout style RPG that's underneath the fog of war, and I just haven't discovered it yet. And you start to find more and more of these things.
That's awesome.
I feel like the chance that you'll be selected to be murdered by a death bot and fed to everybody else should be the price of admission. You have to give them your right shoe as well.
The thing was, like, okay, I went through that, and I took this guy's job, and I didn't complete it because I was starving and attacked a guy, and he killed me the next day.
How long was the fight?
This was the But I really want to go back there and choose stock now instead of spectator, and just see what happens. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. Like, I've had other NPC encounters where they sent me off on a quest across the other side of the world, and then later discovered that if you've got the tracking skill, say, you can just do something then and there that causes them to reconsider and just give you what you want.
Wow.
And that's stuff like that. It's just, it forks in such dramatic ways.
I was going to ask, actually, it sounds like that first thing of like a thing banging on the door, sounds like there's probably a way to solve that with every single one of the skills. Does that thin out at all? As you've got further in the game, do you find your individual skills apply less often?
No, I don't find my individual skills apply less often. Like, there seems... what I find more is that there are some skills which are just like playing not an easy mode but easier mode. So like, I always take strong and melee because that means I don't need to find a good weapon and I'm pretty good in a fight. And I always take botany because that makes finding food easier. And then I'll often take like tracking, which makes it easier to spot enemies from their tracks further away so you can avoid them, or trapping, which makes it when you find it easier to catch animals or cook them and that sort of stuff. And that's kind of like playing the game on easy mode, but I know as I'm walking around the world that there is a lot of stuff that I'm not able to do because I keep finding like machine parts and stuff like that if I was an electrician I could really resolve this sort of thing. And there would be ways to rebalance it that might make the game difficult but might make it radically different at the same time. And I've seen people criticise it for that, the fact that it seems like, oh, surely you must just always take botany. But I kind of don't mind that botany makes it easier and that that is your difficulty modes, basically, because it doesn't have any other sense of
I guess it's fine, but I guess the problem is that it's not apparent when there's a lot of trial and error involved in kind of finding out which are the essential skills or which are the kind of foolish things to take that you'll do if you just kind of want to find the secret stuff. I guess if you're starting the game, it doesn't really give you any indication of what is useful and what is not useful so much.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess if it's a game you're supposed to start over and over again, then you're just going to see that stuff anyway, aren't you? You're going to learn. I love the idea of, like, weakness mechanics in all games, in pen and paper RPGs and board games. Especially chosen weaknesses, which is an amazing thing in a game I constantly bring up by what's it called? I always forget the name of it. Sodium Infernum. Basically,
Vic Davis, Cryptic Comet.
That's right. Yeah, he's definitely a fantastic board game designer. But he designed this game about warring demons in purgatory, which is just too complex to ever be a board game. But is you can play it on a computer. And you design your demon at the start of that game, your kind of archdemon who's aiming to conquer purgatory. And it's a similar mechanic where you can give yourself weaknesses in order to give yourself more benefits. And
is it a Dungeons and Dragons thing or something? Give yourself weaknesses to offset.
I'm not sure.
Because it was... so I started playing Elder Scrolls games with Morrowind, so I never played Daggerfall or Arena. But I remember at the time when Morrowind was new, people were bitching that, they took out that thing where you could give yourself like a negative trait in order to take more positive traits. So I think that must be in Daggerfall. And I've seen it in other stuff as well. And also like Elemental, strategy game, when you make a hero, you can give yourself negative traits. And I loved, because the names are always insults basically. So I pick a leader and I give him a couple of good things. And he's also clumsy, stupid, belligerent, hateful, spiteful, angry, irritable.
I always think of like an old adage in like television writing where if you want your audience to kind of identify with your character, you have them be slightly humiliated or appear weak in some way in the very opening sections of the thing, because they become relatable instantly. And as soon as there's a weakness there, as soon as there's kind of...
Because we all spend our lives being humiliated.
Everyone can relate to it. Everyone's experienced that. And it's like, well, okay, they're not a superhero. So I was watching The Good Wife, actually, which is a brilliant so far, a legal drama. And in the pilot, like, the second thing you see her do is be late for a meeting. And she's sitting alone in a meeting room, and someone comes in and says, "What are you doing here?" And she says, I was supposed to be in this, and she tells her it's a different floor. And then there's an extended sequence where you see her breathlessly running up some stairs, kind of like trying to maintain her dignity. She doesn't. Yeah. And it's like, but there it is. That's the moment where you get the audience. And that's so true of games. It's so true of games when your character either has some self-awareness or has weaknesses that are kind of part of what they do. That just instantly, and especially in an RPG, if you get to select them and not just be the hero guy and just be the flawed hero and get to choose those flaws and make them funny and entertaining, that's just so good.
If one of the disadvantages in NEO Scavenger that you can pick is late for a meeting, I'm choosing that. I'll take that and strong in melee. I'm late for a meeting, but I'm strong in melee.
Yeah.
It has really important tactical considerations in NEO Scavenger as well, because you can also, in certain circumstances, see the traits for your enemies, and just as you can choose feeble at the start, so too will you encounter enemies that have the same. And I mentioned that some of them are scavengers just like you, and you can talk to them. Most of the time they won't be. Most of the time they'll just be marked on the map as a stranger, and you don't know what they are until you get close enough to them to identify of them. And slowly you start to discover that there's different factions out there living in the world. So one are the Bad Mothers, who are cannibals. So pretty much they're always just going to try and attack you because you're just their next meal, basically. But you don't know that when you encounter a stranger in the void. And so you can sometimes say, hello, let's talk. Or they're just running at you from across, like Monty Python, across the field, just...
That's so good. That right at DayZ as well. It's that moment where you encounter another human, and I remember being in a house in DayZ once, and there's like a guy in a clown mask outside, and
always a warning sign, I would
this
say.
guy, and but the brilliant thing about DayZ is it's got this voice chat. I think I've told this story before, where he called in and said, hey you, and through the window come out. And it's that thing of never knowing whether they're friend or foe that, like, that's so... And that seems so realistic, doesn't it?
There's a great video I saw just the other day of DayZ, where a guy walks into a house at night. It's pitch black, basically. There's not pitch black, but very, very dark. There's no lights. And he goes upstairs. He can hear some kind of noise. And when he gets upstairs, there's a guy standing over another person who's like in some kind of crouched or prone position. And the guy's playing through voice comms. He's wearing some kind of mask. I don't think it's a clown mask. But his face is obscured, and he's playing through his voice mask that really cheery song and goes, having a wonderful time. It's just that on a loop, and he never says anything, just plays that song, and he just looks at the guy who's found him and then just walks after him. He never runs, never draws a weapon, just walks and walks and walks. And the guy's running across the cornfield. The guy recording it is like joking about it and laughing. He's like, come on man, stop. And he's like, he can easily get away, and he's got a weapon of his own, but the guy just never stops walking towards him. It's just fucking terrifying.
It's brilliant, because the guy who's playing the psycho in that just logs off halfway through his walk, so he just vanishes. Like, he just vanished in DayZ, so he just like walking towards him and like a ghost just disperses, which is absolutely wonderful. But I love the idea of an RPG. Like, I think in Fallout 2, if you take a really low intelligence stat, then all of your speech for the entire game changes. It changes. You can't form a sentence for the entire game, and it sounds like NEO Scavenger has that kind of dedication to giving you the consequences to your skill choices.
Well, it's things like being able to see that one of the stranger across the way, who's you can see he's got the shotgun, also has the feeble trait. So are you going to gamble on the fact that his shotgun doesn't have any bullets in it and charge at him and try and beat him up so you can steal his shoes? Or
what a shotgun!
You're desperate for shoes in this place. It's like walking around barefoot for a couple of days is going to fuck you up. That's pretty bad. Also, the other thing that you're desperate for is just stuff to hold things in, because you can carry. The most common you'll find up is like scrunched up plastic bags, and so you can take one of those and take a couple of other plastic bags and put it inside, and then fill it with your Betamax tape and your smashed bit of glass and stuff like that. But what you could do is, if you just take one plastic bag and fill it up, you could just be walking along and your bag will rip and all your stuff will fall on the floor. My God. And then you're just like, oh no! All my food, my water, everything. Yeah. And it's just like, well, all I can carry is, well, if you've got trousers, which you might not have done because you start in a hospital gown, you'll have pockets and you can put stuff in your pockets. But otherwise, it's just 2 items, one in each hand. What can I carry? Man. Which is why whenever you find a plastic bag, fill it full of other plastic bags and get the rest.
That's amazing.
There's really cool, like, I don't know how much it's actually simulating in terms of AI, but there are things like I have killed a man, and then in the next turn there has been another stranger nearby, and so I've hid, and the other stranger has come up, looked at the corpse that I've just killed, not knowing that I'm nearby, and gone, oh, I'm having that right shoe. It's like, looked at the corpse, taken the stuff, and stuck off. And you'll like repeatedly encounter people as well, because a lot of combat is fighting a bit and getting injured and running away, or seeing a person and just running away without encountering them at all. And so you'll have this thing of, I encountered a member of the Blue Frog cult, which I really hope is a Spelunky reference. But there's the Blue Frog cult, and they wear blue sashes and gas masks. And there's reasons for that, but you don't know why at that point or anything they believe, but you can eventually find where they live and all that sort of stuff. But they're just out there in the wastes, and they'll yell kind of ambiguously religious statements and often get in fights with you. And so like I had a situation where I was in a campsite with another of these guys, and it was dark, and we both knew that the other person was there but didn't know where, and so couldn't like run towards them or fight them or anything like that. And you can just search, try and sneak away or hide. And it turned out that he had a shotgun, so he fired blindly into the dark and hit me in the shoulder, at which point I just ran off, leaving my sleeping bag and dropping all the stuff I was carrying in that hand because my arm was injured. And then like the next night encountered him again in like a different part of the world, because we were both going in the same direction, so you can just encounter the same person and just end up in a similar situation.
That's really interesting. So it's actually modelling paths across the world, even like you just happen to intersect with.
And I don't know, like, are they going to a specific location, or are they just like generated when I'm nearby and then they vanish again after a certain point? But certainly I've encountered the same person multiple times, and like he shot twice into the dark and hit me in the shoulder and then in the belly, and then the next day when I had dropped all my stuff and so I'd lost my weapon, I found a monkey wrench. So the next day when I saw him, I snuck up on him and brained him, and then stole his gun, and now I had his gun, which is great. Yeah, I got a shotgun, and then I died from my wound a day and a half later. It's just that.
Was he hunting you? Was he after you? Is that?
Well, he's a member of the Blue Frog cult, and they've got their own kind of behaviours that are particular to them and stuff like that. Which is like stuff like after I killed him, I took his gas mask and I took his blue sash, and so I was walking around the world now wearing his blue sash.
Oh, cool.
And that will change the way that other members of the Blue Frog cult will now respond to you.
It's our friend Trevor. Old shotgun Trevor. How you doing, man? Did you get that asshole you were after?
It's just so fucking good.
Sounds like
I love the idea of them yelling ambiguously religious statements. We believe in a higher power, but we're not sure what.
Multiply the sketch.
Trying so desperately not to spoil too much. And I know only, like, I feel like I only know maybe 10% about what this world is about after all I've played it, because I just still so often die quickly and brutally and clumsily and horribly.
That sounds fucking amazing. I'm very interested in that.
That sounds great. It's weird how, I think it was 2 years ago that I played it. It was in the IGF, and I'd never heard of it, and I was assigned it to judge. And I played it, and I was, I had botany and hiding, and I did have a good time with it. I think I nominated it for something. But yeah, it was, I'd never heard of it before then, and I didn't hear it after, except like maybe one or two other IGF judges having played it. And then 2 years later, suddenly, who was it did a diary on it for you guys?
Adam Smith,
right,
who's written about it for us a couple of times earlier in the year. And
then since then you've been obsessed with it, and everything you're saying, like, doesn't sound improbable from what I played. What I played was really interesting and emergent and cool. But it's funny how, like, things out there can be totally amazing but never quite get the traction. Like, that is still not a well-known game, I don't think.
Is it? It's on Steam Early Access? How good?
Yeah, it was originally available just through... his company's called Blue Bottle Games, and it was originally available just through their own site, but for maybe a year now, maybe 6 months, it's been on Steam Early Access, and it's due for final release before the end of the year. So it's
feature complete.
Yeah, it's very almost done. And I've read interviews with him where he said that he doesn't know if he's going to start right away on NEO Scavenger 2, but certainly he's going to make other games of a similar format, and he's really excited about basically improving the tech that underpins it, because he hasn't changed that at all for the last 2 years during which he's been making the game.
Is it literally just him?
Yes, with at least a couple of contractors to help out with art and stuff like that. So when you get the text descriptions, you'll often get still images of the place you're in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He does some of the art himself, I think. I don't know if he's contracted for sound and stuff like that, but certainly the company is just him.
Oh, wow. Man, that's awesome.
I've been playing Endless Legend as well, very briefly, because you've mentioned it a lot before, Tom, right?
Yeah.
And everything you said about it sounded awesome. And also, like, all of the Endless games they always sound appealing. Like,
always got big ideas.
Yeah, Endless Space always has that, like, every time you describe a faction in that, they sound amazing. Is it Endless Space or Endless Legend where there's a faction who can see everybody, but they can only win by unifying them?
Space,
yeah. Right. So I was, it would be on my list of things to play, and last Saturday I had like a big clean out of things that I meant to play, but like all of them, for some reason, I wasn't super motivated to play. Like the things where someone's told me it's good and I believe them, but I like don't have the kind of personal incentive of like with Far Cry 4, I know why I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
I know everything, like I know a huge amount about that game, and I love so much about Far Cry 3, and it was just like I have no trouble getting excited about that. But there's loads of stuff where someone's just said it's good, and in some cases they've said why, but I still can't quite imagine the experience. And with Endless Legend, I always thought it sounded like a game that had big, brave ideas, and like all the factions in it, I gather, are very, very different in terms of like their fundamental mechanics. Like there's one, I think, that just lives on money. Like money is also their food.
Dust
or something.
is their dust knights, and you can mine dust, and that is their essence. Yeah.
So my impression of it was that it sounded like it had interesting ideas, but the reason I hadn't like jumped into it that instant was that I imagined it as a kind of shoddy, kind of good but awkwardly made indie strategy game. Like a lot of things that attempt something very complex and also want to put their own stamp on it and do something really new and interesting as well. On a small budget with a small team, fail. Most of them, in some way, get something basic wrong that it just makes it difficult to play them. And so, even if there are interesting ideas, then I often don't get that far with them. But Endless Legend, fucking hell! It just it feels like it was made by Firaxis. Only actually, it feels. I think it's more logical and kind of cleanly explained and better presented than Beyond Earth is. You know?
Yeah.
I love Civ 4 and 5 to various extents. And Beyond Earth was the first time I really felt like, they just haven't made any progress this time. It's not clearer, it's not more intuitive, it's not nicer to look at. It's basically the same as Civ 5, but on a new planet, but with no interesting differences. And this feels like the next step they should have taken after Civ 5. Yeah. Like, everything is just... Yeah. The interface reminds me a bit of Guild Wars 2, that lovely, like, kind of quite flat and clean, sharp sort of interface furniture, but done in a kind of like painted way. So I think it just looked really, really nice. And they are, admittedly, the only reason it's intuitive to me is because I have played a lot of Civ, and I've also played Elemental, which is Stardock's fantasy turn-based 4X game, which kind of draws on a lot of stuff they did in Galactic Civilizations, which itself is based on, I think, Masters of Magic, I think is the name of it, which is the fantasy version. So the kind of Elemental was them going back to their roots and doing this. And Endless Legend is like so much like Elemental in so many, like just not necessarily the way it plays, but just like the format of it is the same. It's just it's a turn-based Civ-style game, but you have a hero, and the hero is something that gets experience and they can level up. You have a way of designing your own units, which you also do in Elemental, and you can equip them with special equipment, like you can in Elemental, and that same equipment can be applied to a hero, like you can in Elemental, and the whole thing is depicted in a kind of pretty 3D view, like an Elemental, but if you zoom out far enough, it turns into a cloth map, like an Elemental. So it's like there's a massive overlap. But Elemental always felt like they were... Like, it was a really, really good idea, and I so wanted the game it was trying to be. And it was, at launch, it was just too buggy and broken to work that way. I mean, it's good, but it wasn't, like, it didn't fulfill its promise. And then since launch, they fixed the bugs, but I haven't really got super into it for various reasons. But Endless Legend feels like that, plus the cleanness and kind of, I don't know, like, interface polish of Civ. And fucking crazy ideas about what factions can be and how they can work, and just everyone being totally different.
That's the thing about it, that's the thing that they've really been brave about. It's the thing they were really, really clever with in Endless Space as well, but they're so committed to just having totally bonkers, different asymmetrical factions. And
the great thing was, so I did the tutorial, and I played through all the fucking tutorial, and it is a long one. Maybe not, I mean, Civ sort of has a tutorial semi built in, which means it actually ends up taking longer because it's basically, play all of the things you could ever possibly do in the game. This is very much a tutorial mode, and you have to sit through it, and it's got that annoying thing where they're telling you how to do something, and while they're telling you, it's disabled. You can't do the thing they're telling you to do, and then you have to click next, and then on the next screen you're allowed to do it, and that's what dismisses the tutorial pop-up. So that's annoying, but I got through that, and then actually started to play a proper game of it, and all throughout that, the person who's giving you that tutorial information, there's just a little portrait of this like lady in armour, and I didn't really know who that was, and the tutorial was like a little bit irritating. But then when I got to the main game, I thought, well, she's the leader of a certain faction, and I should just play as that faction again, because I know how some of their buildings work, and I should, build on that familiarity and try and just understand the game. And they seem like the sort of default just knights, and also that they are the tutorial race. I didn't choose them. That was given to me as being the sort of default choice. So I selected them again, and then, but on the faction screen, I decided to look at the other faction options, and I didn't really look into any of them. I just picked the one that I was already going to pick. But I saw their whole debrief, and they're from fucking space. Like, it's a fantasy landscape, and it's kind of like, most of it just seems exactly like Elemental in terms of like the races you encounter and the kind of technology that you're using. But these people came down in a fucking spaceship, and their main unit type, I noticed this before, but I didn't think much of it, was called Marines. And they don't have guns, they have crossbows, but they are in basically sort of StarCraft 2 style Marine armour. And it turns out I think they crashed in a spaceship and they've been underground for a while, and now they've just decided to emerge.
Is it the spaceship from Dungeon of the Endless?
I don't know. Because I've heard that story before, but I don't know if that's them
supposed to be linked in some way, I think.
Right. And yeah, they're a race of awesome space knights who love science, and all their stuff is about technology, which it would be because they're from fucking space, whereas these other assholes have just been sitting here.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like the faction I thought was the boring default faction is actually like a super interesting, weird, out of context. Like, I'll say Ian M. Banks novel, because I don't want to say which one, because in the novel I'm thinking of, it's the twist that the person is from space.
Fair enough. There's a faction in that game which just controls trade, and if they're not in the game or they're eliminated, there is no trade anymore. But they get to see all the trades that happen and take a cut, and they are the kind of, the kingmakers of the world. But again, it's like in the space where their objectives are around kind of, aren't necessarily about war. They're about to kind of manipulate people. Like there are warlike races, like a Zerg type race that wants to expand across the world and will always just want to destroy. But there are other, it's about just creating actual properly competing objectives between factions, which is a thing that Civ doesn't have. Everyone wants to do basically the same thing, and really can do that in a mutually agreeable way if they want to. There's nothing forcing conflict between them.
The first race I encountered in Endless Legend gave me like a nice intro, like the sort of friendly leader thing of like, with factions like yours in the world, we'll create a great society or whatever. And I thought that was weird because I hadn't done anything noteworthy. And then I looked up their race history, and they're like the lizard men, and they are basically just interested in forging good relationships and just making sure everyone's happy, and just like they don't really care about war, and they don't really care about expanding their own territory. They're more about just making sure everybody gets on well. Wow, that is so unlike me, because I'm going to kill you in a few turns.
There's a load of other smart stuff as well, like where you're finding, so the world is split into provinces, and you can only build one city in each province. So it stops the Civ thing of just,
I really like that too.
Just build endless cities is what Civ tells you. Whereas this is just, okay, you're going to build one city in this place, and it's going to matter where you put it.
Yeah,
it's going to matter.
Yeah, you only get your one chance. If you don't put it next to that number 6 science tile, you can never put anything on that number 6 tile.
Or it's going to take a long time for your city to grow. Also, the city's block points, so that they're like, if you put one in a ravine or a valley, it will just completely block that off. And strategically, that can block off access to your territory, because obviously enemies can't just go through it. So that it's just so many clever, just smart ideas about the entire genre that they've rethought.
The thing I really liked about the region system was actually that it removed so much decision making from me, because in Civ it's just like you can put a city fucking anywhere, and city. You probably should. All of those places you're thinking about putting a city, you should put a city there, and you should put a city there, and you should put a city there. And this is like, I put my city in my home region, that region is now done. I don't need to think about it ever again. That's just, that whole region is now, I've done what I'm going to do in that region. It might have been a mistake, but I can't undo it. You can technically burn a city to the ground and make a new one, but that's a huge investment cost, obviously. And then when I look at a new region, I'm like, okay, this is the best tile, this is the best place to put a city there. I'll put a city there, and then that whole region is done. That whole section of the map I can stop thinking about. And so it actually narrows your decisions and kind of refines them into more interesting ones of like, which territory do I want to take over next, rather than which of like 17 different places I can put a city should I put a city. I remember in Beyond Earth, one of the reasons I stopped playing was it was so fucking difficult to find anywhere. There were so many exciting places to put a city, and there'd just be a minor faction near there. And there'd be 4 tiles away, and there'd have to be 6 tiles away for you to be able to place a city. And like, okay, I'll go 6 tiles away. Oh no, there's another minor faction right next to them. And the minor factions don't even make sense. They're just like, they're called stations, I think, and they're just like little trading outposts.
Yeah.
Like, why are you fucking me over? There's this really good pitch of land that humanity needs to survive, and I can't build it because I'm just like legally not allowed to put it that close to your territory. Who are you? You're just a fucking trading outpost. I don't give a shit. What the fuck? Why is this a problem? And so, like, my only course of action was, well, I have to destroy them. I have to build up a big enough military that I can just destroy these outposts, just burn them to the ground, so that the rules of the game will allow me to build a city where I want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's just so arbitrary and such bullshit. And I remember I spent ages building towards the right tech and the right tech to exploit certain resources, and getting a settler up and getting them out to the region without them being killed by all the aliens. And I finally got one there, and then someone else had built another set. Like, as I got there, they didn't build one actually. I just discovered there was another minor race, and they were in range of the place that I wanted to build my fucking thing. Oh, for God's sake! It's just all of my game has been fighting this one arbitrary rule that you can't build a city within 6 tiles of another city, and the other cities, they're not even hostile. They're not trying to fuck me over. They don't care about their own expansion. Just they so happen to be in the way, and there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas Endless Legend, it's like you can actually build cities right next to each other, I presume, because if they're in different territories, then it's just one per territory. And so that's just like, there's so many fewer decisions, and it is still arbitrary that, you know, there's no particular logical, physical reason why you would better build another city in that region, but it just makes intuitive sense that, okay, I own this region now, this is mine, no one else can take it from me, no one else can fuck me over by building a city really close to it, you know, and taking its resources, I know these are all mine, and I can just relax about it. They also have the quest stuff is much better in this than it was in Beyond Earth. Beyond Earth, it would keep giving you quests, but it was all just like, I don't really know where they were coming from and why I was getting rewarded for them. Like, you know, we're just humanity. We just landed on this planet. Who is giving me quests and rewarding me for them? And in Endless Legend, the minor factions are. They're just, instead of being a pain in your ass, they're actually quite helpful. They're just like little villages that one faction can have multiple villages, and there'll be Sisters of Mercy keeps coming up for me, which is like a sort of, I guess they're knights of some kind. And there's also like a Minotaur race and a weird insecty race.
Yeah.
And each one, they're a bit like barbarians and stuff, and they will produce little armies and they will attack you. But they're not super aggressive. I've never had an actual problem with them. But if you go up to their city and you talk to them, you have to research like a diplomacy technology to do that. Then they will tell you what you need to do to pacify them. So the Sisters of Mercy just wanted 10 glass steel, which is a special strategic resource that I didn't have at the time, but I later got it as a reward for a different quest, and then I brought it to them and they were pacified. Another one wanted me to prove that I wasn't a warmonger by the next time I got to decide my policy for my race. Don't put any points in military, just expand in other directions, and then we'll believe that you're not an aggressive race and we'll be pacified. Another one wanted me to settle a city in a certain region. It was actually their region, so they were like, we won't be on your side unless you actually own this region and keep up a certain amount of influence. It wasn't really clear whether they were asking me to do that or whether I just knew that was what would get them on my side, because it was more like, I'm going to come in and settle your homeland and then have influence over you. But I did that and it worked. And they're all, you know who's giving them to you, you know why that would help. And then once you've done it, all those people are on your side, and you can go one step further and actually assimilate them, I think is the word, where that minor race becomes part of your empire. You can build their unit type, and also they give you like a passive bonus to all your stuff. So that's basically all I've done in the game that I've played, is just concentrate on the minor races. I've met that lizard race who just want to form better relationships, but we've had no actual interactions really. And I've just been doing quests for little minor races, and I find like one of them will be to build a city in a certain region. Another one will be to build extractors on a certain number of resources, and one of those resources is in that region. So after I settle that region, I'll be able to build that. And then another one is to keep my populace happy in this certain city for a certain number of turns, and that I can do after I do this. And then that quest gives me a reward of 10 or 15 glass steel, and these other guys only want 10 glass steel, so I can just walk over there and give some of that to them and complete their quest. And it's just been a really satisfying thing of like completing a bunch of basically RPG quests through the way I build my empire.
It's also about extending influence in a way that isn't about just making a resource bigger or going in, saying a military army act or something. It's like it's a way of expanding influence that is just about interacting with people who want things. One of them just wanted me to keep my own home city happy for 5 turns, just to show that I was a good empire. Basically, I look after my people. Like, they will become part of my empire if I show that my empire is nice to live in. Which is like, fair enough. That would be a thing. It's one of the few turn-based strategy games. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the best strategy game for a couple of years. I think it's one of the few turn-based strategy games that I really want to play multiplayer, because the factions are so wildly different that the scope for human intrigue that opens up is just really exciting.
Yeah.
I don't know what the infrastructure is like for actually doing that, but Endless Legend is brilliant.
My only complaint so far is that it is visually noisy. So the interface is really clean and I understand it, but the world map is just full of stuff that I don't know what it does. And you can hover over a tile and find out what an individual thing does, but just to look at it, like, even just to find out where my units are, I can stare at that for a long time and then be like, oh, is that like a blue flag there? Or is that like another thing? And then, yes, that is one of my guys. And where are my cities again? I can't quite see them through this forest. And then, like, glowing, they say, ruins are glowing tiles. Like, there are 17 different things glowing on the screen right now.
That fucked me up in the tutorial.
And only 2 of them are ruins.
Yeah.
Just like walking around the entire map. Is this the thing I need to find? No. No.
And then it's some quite simple stuff like, it's much better than Beyond Earth at telling you how to show the resource overlay, where it tells you what resources each tiles give you. For Beyond Earth, I spent ages looking for that. And it's vital information. You literally can't settle a new city without knowing that. And, you can't settle a city in a good place without knowing that. And Endless Legend has it really clearly explained, but then when you turn it on, even if a tile gives you 0 of a resource, it will show that. And so the map becomes just this hideous mess of numbers, and I can't see... I mean, when I look at an individual one, I can tell the difference between 0 and 1, but at a glance, I can't see what a good tile is, because everything has a 0 on it for various things.
It's interesting, because it kind of looks beautiful. It is really cluttered, but it's got a really nice art style to it. But it's a lot of the people who work there are kind of ex-Ubisoft people, and they worked on Ruse, which is a really overlooked, interesting strategy game. Which also had segments, the segmented map where you'd build bases, and a lot of the kind of similar ideas are kind of hidden away in that game, and also a lot of the UI genius of Ruse kind of makes its way into Endless Legend, though it is massively cluttered. But a lot of the reasons why it's so pretty and so kind of sleek is that those guys, that's where the talents come from. It's really cool.
I did find one of my early quests got me a reward that was a special shield that had some kind of magic properties, and it was a shield that increased my damage, which was cool. But it required like 10 titanium, and I didn't have any titanium. So all of my early game was just like, I don't know if this is a particular habit I have in games, but if I'm given something unique and it requires something to use it, then the whole game is just about, I have to have the resources to do that, even if by the time I have them, I've already researched my own technology that's better than this thing. The fact that I was given something unique and, it's kind of mine, it means that the most important thing in the world is we need to be able to use this shield. And so I had to get a titanium extractor, and I had to get 10 titanium, and I had to research technologies to use it. And then some of the other quests I've had is like, one of them was to loot a particular ruin. Another one was like to go on a ruin looting spree of like 5 different ruins within 10 turns or something. And then another one, which I haven't done yet, is in winter, I have to go to someone's grave at night and sprinkle 5 of this certain resource called like, it's not redstone, but it sounds like redstone. It's something I can't make yet, but I could buy it on the market if I had a market. And that you sprinkle it on some hero's grave and it'll bring them back. But the quest text is really like equivocal about, if you think it's a good idea, then during winter go to this person's grave and sprinkle 5 things on their grave. So I haven't done that yet, but that sounds intriguing. Tom, do you go to BlizzCon?
I did go to BlizzCon. Have you guys been to BlizzCon before?
No, I've actually never
been to a BlizzCon. No.
I only started caring about it recently because basically when they moved the StarCraft 2 finals to it, because it used to be that like the GSL, whatever, would be the real tournament, and then BlizzCon would be some kind of show match, and it wouldn't really matter. And then Blizzard obviously noticed this and decided we should have the actual match that matters here, and so they do now.
Yeah, BlizzCon is spectacular and impressive and terrifying, like in the same way that watching a column of tanks would be. There you look at them and you think, wow, that's noisy, and that's huge, and also there's a lot of money happening there. And BlizzCon is just an astonishing tribute to Blizzard's worlds that they've built up. And when you go into BlizzCon, you're being absorbed into their lore, almost like just you're surrounded by life-size models of Diablo 3 demons, and Jim Raynor's over there and Kerrigan's over there for StarCraft 2, and the kind of noise of fury and passion of the people who are there, who are just so invested in these worlds, is kind of remarkable. And unlike,
you mean Tim Edwards, basically?
Yeah, Tim was there. And he was delighted. He loves World of Warcraft, and but yeah, just the people there are just. It's just it's a really nice, good-hearted event that reminded me why gaming communities are kind of cool. It's been quite a cynical, bad year for kind of online communities and stuff, and people being mean to each other on the internet. And then going to BlizzCon was just, I sat at a bar with a guy who didn't even go to BlizzCon, but he was in the hotel near BlizzCon, and he hired a house out with like 12 friends who he met 12 years ago and used to raid with. And he doesn't even play World of Warcraft anymore, but he went along to meet these friends. And they all sat there and they set up loads of monitors in the front room and just kind of were playing the BlizzCon live streams, and people were just kind of sitting there watching them. And he didn't even go to the main show because he didn't have a ticket. He just watched it kind of near the event.
So he lived in the same city?
No, he travelled. He's from Poland. He travelled
to watch it on a live stream. Okay.
I was sitting there. It was really surreal because I was sitting at the hotel bar waiting for my flight, and we were both watching, like, talking about Formula 1 and stuff, and we were watching like tractor drag racing, which is the only thing you'll see on American television in terms of, it's strange, so strange. And he was talking about how much he loved World of Warcraft, and he was an engineer and didn't even play anymore. But the fact that this was still part of his life just goes to show, how intense the community bonds are in games like Blizzard's games, in World of Warcraft, in online communities. Not just for Blizzard products, but I mean, like, Chris will tell you about Star Wars Galaxies and the kind of friendships that he made playing that game. And that stuff's actually really valid and important and really positive for a lot of people who might not necessarily, a lot of people find friend groups there when they just don't have friends in their real lives. And for that, Blizzard is so good at creating safe spaces for people online to have fun together. Whether it's in StarCraft 2 or in World of Warcraft especially. Even in Hearthstone, like, just all the interactions I've had with people in Hearthstone have been positive because it restricts you to these emotes, and they're always used in really humorous ways by the audience. And you just have Blizzard found a way of kind of creating good interactions online between community members. If
you've never been to like a convention around a specific thing, it's kind of hard to imagine sort of how different it is. Like, I was at Fantastic Arcade, which is a video games section of a film festival, and it's pretty well attended by sort of video game people, and it's in a cinema, and there's like only a certain number of seats, and I was like sitting down in that cinema, and there was just like a couple of spare seats next to me, and they were basically the only spare seats in the place, and somebody came by and was just like, "Oh, can I take that seat?" And I said, "Yeah." And I sat down, and they turned out to be an ex-Blizzard employee, actually, sorry, a current Blizzard employee, and someone who dabbled in like indie development, and we just immediately became friends. We just like had the same kind of interests, and just could talk about all the same stuff. And it's so weird to like, I think maybe because it was a cinema, the idea of like being in a cinema and the person who happens to need the spare space next to you happens to have all the same interests as you, and also love the same video games, and also like his job at Blizzard was something like sort of a chief of like rapid prototyping or something, like basically what I do as an indie developer. And it was just so weird to be in a place where like that's what can happen when there's a spare seat next to you, is the person who sits down happens to like have a huge overlap in all the things they care about. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've really got that sense from, like, it was the first Hearthstone tournament, and Hearthstone being obviously a virtual card game, and they kind of the stage was just extraordinary. They had this huge kind of projection of a flaming fireplace, and they built a kind of pub around it. And then the two contestants were locked in this kind of, it looked like an airtight chamber around the fireplace, because they didn't want them to hear the crowd. Because,
of course.
When a card is drawn, if the crowd reacts big, then obviously you've got something, and you change your strategy. And but they had their faces just close up to their faces all the time on these enormous screens on either side, and it was absolutely riveting.
So I saw footage of the StarCraft tournament in which I couldn't tell how much of what I was seeing was physically part of the stage and how much was being projected onto a screen, because it looked like they were like it was just this enormously elaborate series of screens, basically, including a massive central one, but then also other ones built off the side of it. And then I think part of what I was seeing was actually the booths that the players were in, one booth on the left and one on the right, and like windows into that. And every time I'm watching this, like particularly in StarCraft, I don't know anything about Hearthstone, and I didn't see that tournament, but in StarCraft in particular, the people spectating that match know everything that's going on. They see both players' vision. And most of the biggest, greatest plays in StarCraft 2 history are when one player doesn't know that something's about to happen, and the other player does. And when that is happening, both the commentators and the entire crowd are fucking screaming about it. Just like, oh my god! And so it's unthinkable that the other player is not hearing some of this or getting some impression. So they must like really hermetically seal. I know there was at least one example where I can't remember the name of the players now, but a Protoss player who's kind of known for crazy innovative builds built a mothership at a time when nobody built mothership. It just wasn't a done thing. It was just known as a useless unit. But if nobody thinks you're going to build it, then it has some advantage. And it caused such an incredible reaction from the crowd that the other guy was like, what? What is about to hit me?
Yeah, the StarCraft 2 stage was absolutely extraordinary at BlizzCon. So you're right, the two players were subsumed into the set in a kind of floating position where it kind of looks like they're part of a giant StarCraft 2 interface. And on the left screen you see one player's perspective, and on the right screen you see the other players playing.
Right, awesome.
So you can tell precisely where they're clicking,
that's
looking
great.
at each time. And also there's a big central screen as well where the commentators are kind of pointing the view. But the entire stage, it was like quite basic geometry, but there were very complex projections onto it that would shift throughout the match. So if there was a Terran player on the left and a Zerg player on the right, the entire right side of the stage would become Zergified by these tentacles, and the left side would be kind of Terranified. And when one person won, so let's say the Zerg player won, the Zerg tentacles would swarm across the other side of the arena. It all become like a big Zerg thing. It was just fantastic, and the crowd was so knowledgeable and so into it. It was just extraordinary to watch that much excitement for each individual play.
It was a really good final for StarCraft 2. Yeah. I hadn't watched any StarCraft 2 matches for years, really, and I just was reminded, oh yeah, that's still a thing, I should tune into that. And it was actually one of my favourite players, Life, versus... Who was the Terran player? Do you remember?
Can't remember.
I want to say Bomber, but that might just be because I watched a Bomber match earlier today. It was a Terran player who's won many tournaments before and is known for being brilliant. Oh no, was it Taja? I think it was Taja.
Honestly, I'm not that familiar with StarCraft 2. I just kind of
every time, so I don't really know that difference between Terran players that well, because I'm the weird thing about StarCraft 2 is it's kind of like made me understand people who support sports teams, because I don't support particular players so much, but I support Zerg. I'm just generally in favour of Zerg. Anyone who plays as the Zerg race I'm on their side, and I'm dead against the other people. And Protoss I'm neutral about, and Terran I kind of hate. And so anytime it's Terran versus Zerg, it's like the good guys versus the bad guys. And they have this, it's a testament to StarCraft 2 really, that they are so different that they can be balanced and evenly matched in a way that when I watch it, it seems like Terrans are bullying the Zerg. It seems like Zerg are kind of almost defenseless and Terrans can just fuck with them. And then when a friend of Quake & Crowbar, Rich McCormick, watches it, he always sees it the other way around. He sees Zerg as just this unstoppable, horrible swarm, and they just do terrible, terrible things to Terrans. He can't understand how Terrans can ever defend against it. Because he has been Terran playing against Zerg endlessly on the ladder. I don't play StarCraft 2 at all, but I just watch a lot of Zergs, and there aren't that many of them who actually do well. And so every time I see one who's doing well, it seems like they're just bringing it back from the brink of this horribly unbalanced game where they don't stand a chance, but they just, through sheer ingenuity, manage to win. And so it was great to see a Zerg in the final, and the match between them and the Terran, Tasia, I'm pretty sure it's Tasia, was really, really tense, absolutely nail-biting and really dramatic.
Blizzard also announced a new game.
Yeah, I came to this a little bit late, and maybe a shade more cynical than many people, in that I just kind of vaguely heard on Twitter that they had just announced something, and so I tuned in, and I tuned in during a sort of CGI trailer. There was, a teaser, I guess, that was not showing what the game would be at all. But it was like a movie trailer in that it had this kind of relatable American kid who was, like, watching all these... It looked like a bit like... Did you see that League of Legends CGI trailer where they just showed a bunch of heroes just horribly mauling each other, and there wasn't really a point to it? It was just, like, endless violence. But very characterful.
But the kids liked it.
Each individual character sort of showed their thing. You know, they killed people in the way that they kill people. And it was that, but with a little, like... horrible stereotypical American kid with freckles kind of going whoa, oh, and then like hiding from the characters, and then like one of the good characters befriends him and says, you know, the world can always do with more heroes. But in a horrible that was a bad voice that I just did, but there was a worse voice because it was
Cockney lady,
it was a faux Cockney, like sort of Dick Van Dyke style fakeness. And it was just, I was watching it and just like curling up inside and dying of like, oh god, what is this? And then when they showed it, it was TF2, but with some slightly different classes, and I was pretty cynical about it, possibly because the CGI trailer turned me against it so much that I was like, oh god, this is horrible. And then the game footage they showed didn't seem bad. I was just like, well, yeah, I played this game, it was TF2. But you played it, right, Tom?
Yes, I mean, like that's cinematic trailer is kind of important, really, because it's like laser targeted at the audience that game wants to appeal to, and that game is those kids. It's like the adolescent, hooded, reluctant, slightly awkward teenager, and it's the tiny kid who hasn't yet watched a Marvel film and doesn't know what really cool superheroes actually look like. And I kind of I've just wrote a feature about it in which I called Overwatch a terrifying multimedia kraken, in that it's kind of as much about creating a universe where you can make movies and comics and action figures as it is about building a game. And it kind of feels as though World of Warcraft, for example, is now going to be a massive movie directed by Duncan Jones.
Yeah.
And they've also got, so much fiction around that game. They've built that over, a decade. And I think Overwatch, they just kind of want to fast track that and just get straight to the bit where they're making the movies and they're creating the world and the universe. And they've got this kind of Team Fortress 2 style team shooter, and then but there's going to be no story within that game like TF2 really. All the story's going to be told outside, and it's heavily implied that it's going to be the responsibility of Blizzard's admittedly very talented cinematics team to produce videos and kind of side kind of shorts and maybe more extended things. And you have to expect comics and things like that as well. And they're building a superhero universe that will undercut Marvel through sheer age. Like Marvel films are PG-13, but kids love superheroes from the age of 6. And Overwatch will be the thing that they can play and they can interact with. And they haven't announced whether it will be free to play or a boxed product or whatever, but surely it'll be free to play because they're going to add endless heroes to that
have
thing.
To be.
Like there are 12 heroes in it already. The flash shot they showed, of all the characters lined up, there were 3 or 4 more even in that picture.
Right.
And I was talking to them and they were saying that they could turn those heroes around. They're always being developed, and there's just going to be an endless, like in the way that Team Fortress 2 only has 9 classes. Overwatch can have potentially infinite variations on those classes.
Yeah, I mean, Dota has over 100, right?
And, that's kind of it. Yeah,
it's so funny the relationship between those two companies because Dota was a modification of various sorts to Warcraft 3, and Valve saw how popular it was and how good a job IceFrog was doing of maintaining it. He wasn't the original inventor of the mode, but he was the person kind of keeping it up to date. And so they hired him to make Dota 2, and that was weird in itself. I remain to this day troubled by that because it was like, yeah, he didn't even really invent that mode in itself, so that's weird. I don't know where they stand with the original creators of Dota. And And then also, Dota uses Blizzard's models. And they created new characters, and characters in inverted commas, which means new names for Blizzard's characters. And they were just using Blizzard's models. I mean, there was no pretense about that. That was what Dota was. It was just using Blizzard's models and giving them new names. Yeah. And what's the name of the ogre thing?
Pudge,
yeah, it was just a new name for the zombie ogre thing in
zombie
Warcraft. I can't remember what the original name was now. But for any given Dota character, you can say which Warcraft 3 character that actually is. And yeah, they picked new names and they somewhat changed some of those characters. But if I were Blizzard and they hadn't agreed to that, it would have been fucking hell, we're suing them. Like, that is just an absolutely shameless thing. I never heard one way or the other, but I always suspected that they must have had some kind of approval from Blizzard, because it just seems so shameless and so, like, even if it's legally okay, just you wouldn't do it to another developer. You wouldn't steal their design.
I think there was a lot of wrangling going on for a long time.
Sued them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there was legal wrangling, and then they came to some sort of agreement, the details of which were never disclosed.
Yeah.
But I asked Mike Morhaime a few years ago, and he said basically that Blizzard's artists would work or consult with Valve's artists to make sure that their character designs were distinct enough so as to be similar to, but legally distinct from.
I think
it's like, didn't Blizzard just sort of steal a bunch of ideas from Games Workshop though for all their games?
Sure, I mean, like, but ideas.
Games Workshop just didn't steal those ideas from
like everyone stole
lots of other board.
But the line here was so direct, because the look of Pudge just is the look of the. I don't know it that well from Warcraft 3, but I know it from World of Warcraft. The big zombie.
Pudge or the Butcher. I can't remember what.
It is. Pudge is the one I was talking about. And the big stitched together Frankensteinian fat ogre with a hook for one hand and a sort of lopsided eye, and all the individual characteristics are true of the Dota 2 hero that are true of the character in World of Warcraft that I met, because I was a zombie in World of Warcraft, and that was one of the early. I think he's like a friendly NPC. I can't remember what he did exactly, but and they're like, Arthas and any Warcraft 3 character you can name. The ghoul in Warcraft 3 is the life stealer in Dota 2, and it's so close that, like, if they claimed that was a new game, if they just Valve announced a new game that has all these characters that happen to be super fucking similar to the Warcraft 3 characters, everyone would be like, what? How can you do that? Just morally, how can you do that? How can you be okay with yourselves at night for doing that? And so it's really, really funny to me that Blizzard's new game is just, how can you do that? That's so much like TF2. How can you even... And then you realise, because they stole from you first.
Also, because you can't legally patent game mechanics, and like
I mean, I don't have any points to make about the legality of it, because I don't really know, and I'm sure. I mean, game characters are so fucking generic anyway that for any given game character, I'm sure you can find one other game that has a character that's so similar to that you could sue. But in the case where there's a causal link and a visual similarity link, it just seems like. If I was on that team, I'd be like, we shouldn't fucking do this. This is terrible. We're just stealing some artist's work for our own personal profit.
I think Overwatch, like the art of Overwatch, is very different to TF2's in a lot of ways. So there's the same kind of Pixar-esque execution of those character models and the way that those environments look and stuff. But in terms of the designs, like Blizzard are going for they've got a plot that's set 60 years in the future, where they can have almost any character from any corner of pop culture turn up. So they can have like a cowboy guy, they can have the cyborg ninja guy, they can have any kind of anime or kids cartoon or Marvel thing that you want to point at that has a kind of archetype in it. They can just create a character in this universe that looks a lot like that guy and that will appeal to the people who like that kind of thing. And that's really the point of Overwatch's art. It's like it is designed to be more expansive and more appealing than Team Fortress 2. Which actually, if you think about Team Fortress 2, it's kind of weird.
It's
really weird. Like the whole premise of that thing is super odd.
I feel like they made one big leap from the militaristic, realistic look to the exaggerated, characterful look. And I feel like another leap they should have made was having people who are actually different to each other in terms of like some women maybe in there somewhere, or like. Just like more diversity, and so Blizzard's lineup makes that more obvious. Like, this like having them be really crazily different makes a lot of sense, because there's nothing in Team Fortress 2's fiction was never going to restrain them to a particular lineup. It's not like they had to keep them all to be human males in order to fit with a plot, because the plot is fucking whatever the hell they decided to be this week.
The plot is super strange anyway. It's two separate construction companies fighting over arbitrary shit that you don't even ever know about. But yeah, I think maybe, I mean, I don't want to speak for Val, but I think maybe one of the reasons why they didn't have female characters is because they didn't want smack talk directed at female avatars. They didn't want that kind of attitude or expression in the game, because there's free chat, open chat in the game. And
I mean, the price you pay for that, I mean, if you're worried about, like, women being offended about that, the price you pay for that is women just don't have anyone to play with.
I
That's a pretty
agree.
high price.
I totally agree. I'm just wondering why Valve might have done that. But yeah, Blizzard's lineup is interesting because it is really super diverse, but at the same time, the first female character they revealed was a purple sniper with a massive kind of sexy elf boob window cut, and a really like crazy body figure that's just
and her ass accentuates when she wears her goggles. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
There's a gif of this, and she has some goggles that she wears. I don't know if they give her a vision mode or anything, but that's the thing that happens.
Yeah.
And someone made a gif of that happening in the video, and you can see her figure actually gets more sexualized as she does it. It's like her ass kind of sticks out further when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's Widowmaker. She's the side character, and she's the most egregious example of it. But actually, if you just look at the lineup of Overwatch characters, there are men of all shapes and sizes in that thing. It's like there's a guy who looks a bit like Perch, he's enormous and fat, and there's the kind of lithe samurai, and there's the hulking Reinhardt, who's this knight, and all the women are just the woman template with slightly varying hip widths. It's the.
So the Cockney lady, her voice was fucking awful, but her character model didn't seem that bad. It seemed actually pretty like a person who was cool for her own reasons rather than cool because she was sexy. But
that's largely true of most of the female. Like, there's one called Farah who's in a battle suit, and she fires rockets, and her ultimates the ultimate ability is one of the things that sets Overwatch apart from TF2, is that she kind of launches herself into the sky and just rains a barrage of rockets down on the entire area. And she's just fucking awesome. Like, that's just a massively awesome power fantasy, and you just happen to be, it's a female character who's making that. And, most of it is like that, but it's just the art. More than anything, I think it's just the art rules seem to require that gender be massively exaggerated, gender difference be massively exaggerated. So the men have to have the broad shoulders, and the women have to have the impossibly slim waist to hip ratios, just to make them look different. And it's not like entirely Blizzard's fault, because that art style comes from a way of drawing in anime that it's obviously kind of riffing on, and that's always those rules have always existed. Like, I remember, like, Akira, for example. The guy who drew Akira got massive slack for not drawing beautiful women all the time, and he said, "Well, I just draw how I want to draw," and he just drew people with all their weird imperfections. But for a lot of kind of anime, it does kind of really separate the genders by body shape, like in massively exaggerated ways. And because this art style draws from that, it also happens to have inherited all those inbuilt biases about body shape.
It's not exactly the first time Blizzard have done this, though, is it?
No, that is true.
They have a bit of a history with it.
Yeah.
Well, who did you play as when you played?
I played as many people as I could. So I played as most fun as Hanzo, who's the samurai archer. And what I will say for it is that the hero is a completely different to one of them. Right. Not just in skill sets. Like, it's 12 classes. They've revealed the 12 playable characters of 12 different classes. They even have different traversal methods. So Hanzo, the samurai warrior, can clamber up things. He can climb up little surfaces. And the sniper Widowmaker has a grappling hook that lets her grapple up to sniper spots. The enormous ape can leap massive distances, and the maps are designed to give you ways to feel cool as your hero individually. I've mounted up areas and gotten into places that as Hanzo that I couldn't have ever done as most of the other classes in the game, which makes you feel a little bit special for doing it. Yeah. But Hanzo is essentially kind of a mid-range sniper, a lot like if you had the sniper in TF2 with the bow, which he does have a bow. Yeah. So it plays in a similar way. You kind of mid-range, just outside the combat, spearing guys one after the other. But he's also he's got a kind of radar arrow where he shoots it, and it a pulse emits, and it reveals the location of all the enemies in that pulse to your entire team.
Ah, cool.
So you can get a little kind of reconnaissance. That's one of his skills. His other one is the ricochet shot, where he fires one arrow and then as soon as it hits a wall, it bounces into loads of arrows. And you can fire it. So if there's a guy, there are a lot of shields in the game. So if there's a guy who's put a shield up, you can bounce it off a wall behind him and he'll get spiked by 10 arrows. Or I enjoyed it most when I fired it into just a tiny room from outside. If I knew a guy was in that room, you fire the ricochet arrow in there. It's just going to be like a murder zone in there for a moment. But characters also have ultimates, and this is one of the things that really differentiates it from TF2 in terms of rhythm, in terms of like creating crunch moments that are really exciting, that define the flow of the entire match. And it's a lot like Dota in this respect. In that everyone fires off their ultimates when it's important and then have to wait for them to recharge before they can use them again. Hanzo's ultimate is that he draws back his bow and he's like screams a Japanese war cry that echoes across the map and everyone hears it, and then he fires an arrow that turns into 3 spiralling dragons that obliterate everything in their path, and it just goes on for miles across the entire map. So when you hear that, you're like, fuck. And then you see the dragon come and everyone dies.
It goes through walls, I take it.
I don't think it actually goes through walls, but if you're shooting across the maximum, get the most possible exposure. And the maps are quite narrow and simple. There are kind of like areas that are definitely designed for different for flanking characters. Then there are big open areas where the big tank characters are supposed to fight. And yeah, it's good. It's really fun. I had loads of fun even just dipping into it for a few hours. Hanzo is a good example. Reinhardt's really fun. He's an almost hulking knight with a hammer, and his ability, he can throw up a shield and just hold it there until all the damage is, it takes too much damage and it disappears. But your friends can hide behind that shield and shoot through it, so you can just form a push. And this isn't even his ultimate ability. You can just do this almost any time. So you can just jump down into an area, put up your shield, your team can get behind you, and you can just step forward a little bit by bit. And if that runs out, you can pin people to a wall, so you press a dash button move where you'll shoot across the map in a massive straight line. If you happen to hit someone along the way, you'll pick them up and carry them with you. And if you then hit a wall, you'll just kill them. You just smash them against the wall and they die, and that's it. And that's Reinhardt. And every character has this, has a way of being cool or doing something awesome, being deadly and kind of impacting the match. And for them to put 12 unique characters like that into this thing already, and already have loads more lined up, it's kind of really exciting. I really want to play all of those characters and kind of get used to them and get my favourites.
Yeah. The traversal thing is interesting because I think that Valve can't do that with TF2. They could add a class, but they couldn't add a new traversal method because it would have to work with all the other maps they've ever made. Yeah. When you launch those launch maps, you might think when you launch, we can add more later. And you can add more maps, but you can't change the way the game works in such a way that it would affect all the maps, or you'd have to update all of them, and then the whole balance could change, and it could be a horrible nightmare.
Yeah, that's definitely... I think it's going to be quite good. I think it's going to take over the world. And be quite good at the same time. Frankly.
It'll take over the world and be quite good.
Do you have any sense of whether or not it's made from the remnants of ideas originally created for Titan?
It definitely is. Yeah, it definitely is. It's definitely in terms of, I think a lot of the world building that they put into Titan has definitely crossed over into Overwatch. They were quite honest about that, actually. They were just saying that Overwatch has been developed from the ground up as its own game, but it's definitely taken on a lot of Titan in terms of the design work and stuff. So I imagine that the world we're seeing in Overwatch isn't too far off from what Titan's world might have looked at. But Titan, they said, was just ended up being a confused kind of idea. And one of the interesting things about Overwatch and Hearthstone and Diablo 3's Adventure Mode is that they're all focused on kind of short sessions, whereas World of Warcraft is about having a second life. I think now Blizzard have smartly realised that there are so many games on the market that people are just kind of too busy for that stuff, and they're trying to create experiences that you can dip into and dip out of. Hopefully Overwatch could be that.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Yes.
Let's do just that. Zachary Arundel writes, Dear Father Kratos, obviously games don't use Christmas enough. Batman Origins, can't think of anything else. But are there any classics, or otherwise, you like to wheel out at this magical time of year? My Christmas routine, nothing beats getting back to my parents' house on December the 24th. Hello, Mater, Pater and Canis. I don't know how to pronounce those. It's Latin, so nobody knows how to pronounce those because all the Latin people are dead. immediately going up to my old room, obviously left untouched as a shrine to my good self, and having a full playthrough of Fable 2 with a meter of mini whispers on one side and a platter of cheese and chutney on the other. That sounds good. I don't even like chutney. Or Fable 2. I'll briefly nip downstairs around 6 p.m. for tea, tolerating my parents' parochial chit-chat for an hour or two, and then head back upstairs with about 6 beers and start a nice long XCOM Enemy Within playthrough. Bliss. Cheers, Zach. Do you guys have any Christmassy rituals?
No Christmassy rituals. I almost always play lots of games over the Christmas break, and often recently it's been Football Manager. It seems to be the time when I properly dip into whatever the new FM game is. Like I haven't really played much of FM 2015 at this point, but give me a couple of weeks off and I'll probably dive into that.
In terms of like Christmassy games, if you play Darwinia on Christmas, they all wearing Christmas hats. So, what more could you ask for than that? I probably should have a Christmas game. I have a lot of Christmas music, like certain songs that I first listened to at Christmas that I now associate with that. Some of them are Christmassy songs, like Low have a Christmas album, but Ugly Casanova. I think they've only ever done one album, and I first heard it at Christmas, and now that's super Christmassy for me. But yeah, I would like there to be some games like that.
This Christmas leveling hit Man Blood Money?
Yes, that's true actually, yeah, the Christmas leveling hit Man Blood Money is awesome, and it's inescapably Christmassy. Half the guards have Christmas hats on, and you can disguise yourself as one of them to feel festive, and then kill people.
I don't really have traditional games I played, but I think I will play The Long Dark this Christmas, which is about being lost and starving to death in a winter wonderland. So maybe I'll enjoy playing that. I think maybe it is the time. It's when you have enough time to delve into a strategy game. Maybe I'll play NEO Scavenger over.
Yeah, I was just going to say, NEO Scavenger sounds like a good choice.
Yeah,
Endless Legend sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
There is Endless Legend has a winter mechanic where I don't think it's half the year. It feels like less than a third of the year. Winter closes in and all of your movement speeds are halved and all your production is halved and all your food production is less by one, and it's a really bad time, but it doesn't last that long.
Apparently the winters grow longer and there's actually a doomsday clock.
Oh really? Oh,
yeah,
shit.
so
I remember thinking when my first winter, when it showed me all the debuffs I would get during this winter. I was like, oh god, this is going to be rough. And then like 4 turns later, it was like, winter's over, spring is here. And I suddenly found myself thinking like, is it like a maester or something in Game of Thrones? And all you've ever known is long sleeves, child. That's me right now. You ever known the long summers? Adam Dawes writes, Dear Pengur Nak Pebjon, which he later says in a PS is Crate and Crowbar in Rot 13, which is where you rotate every character through 13 points in the alphabet. Quick question for you. What was your favourite coin-op arcade game? Mine was probably Golden Axe.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe X-Men. Those are the only two I really played for a lot. Yeah, they were both side-scrolling beat-em-ups, and they're both things where you picked your particular character. I think Golden Axe was the one I played the most. And I played it... did I play both? I definitely played Golden Axe at a arcade in San Francisco, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago for Ed McMillan's birthday party. I was still a journalist at the time, and I totally lucked into... I was friends with Kyle Gabler, who did World of Goo and Little Inferno, although that hadn't been made at the time. And I had arranged to meet him just for coffee, and then it turned out he couldn't make it because he was going to Ed McMillan's birthday party, and I was like, could I go to Ed McMillan's birthday party? It was a real fish out of water because I was a journalist and nobody trusted me. Fair enough. It was set next to a big old-fashioned arcade that had Golden Axe. I think maybe it had X-Men as well. And I played it for the first time since it was a new thing in arcades. And it was so weird because it was just a game experience where had all the nostalgia of a thing that you played that long ago, but also when you played it, it was limited in a way that you could only play it a certain number of times. I don't remember who I played it with really back when I did play it. But obviously, because you had to pay for each time you played it, it was a rare thing. It wasn't like the games I was playing at home at that time would have been like Castle for the BBC Micro, like Battle Zone for the BBC Micro, and I was just playing very few games. There just weren't that many games in the whole world, and so anything that was exciting in any way was a massive deal. Do you guys remember playing coin-op arcades?
I never really played any as a kid. The one I always go to now, and I might have mentioned it on a podcast before, was there's a specialist rare game shop that you get in Japan. There's a couple of them. One in Tokyo, and it's called Super Potato. And it's just like 3 floors of old NES cartridges and SNES cartridges and Game & Watch and varying levels of conditions. And because it's in Japan, a lot of these games are games that were never released outside of Japan. So they're not just old, they're also, they never came to the West in the first place. So it's a fascinating place to go as a tourist if you're a game fan and just pour through these shelves. There's shelves full of like old Japanese games magazines and stuff like that as well, which is just like a completely different culture. But if you go up to the 4th floor, they have 6 or 7 arcade machines which are just free to play. So they've rigged them so you don't have to put in money anymore. And there's a little bar where you can buy bottles of Coke or whatever. And there was a game there called the Outfoxies. I can't remember if I've described this on the podcast before.
I think you might have.
I've definitely ranted about it. But it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where essentially you are hired by someone as a mercenary to kill a bunch of other mercenaries. And each fight is just a one-on-one battle. But the levels are really large and really dynamic. And so, for example, one of the earliest levels, maybe the first, is set in a kind of aquarium/museum where there is a whale hanging from the ceiling and a fuse is lit at the start. And the fuse, as you're fighting, side on, kind of not as fast-paced as like a Street Fighter or anything like that, quite clumsy and basic in terms of its actual moveset that your character can perform. But the fuse goes up and eventually explodes at the top, and the whale drops down and smashes some aquarium stuff, which causes water to flood that then washes characters up in it and that kind of stuff. And the whale eventually falls onto the trident of a huge statue of Poseidon that explodes down that, and as everything gets smashed and the water starts rising up from the floor, eventually it picks up the whale and starts to float it towards the ceiling. And if you're in the water, now there's sharks on the water and you're trying to get on top of the whale and that sort of stuff. There's another level which does something similar, but with a helicopter instead of a whale. And what the helicopter does is it falls down, is it breaks through successive floors of the skyscraper, and you fall through deeper and deeper into this. So in the aquarium level, you fall down and then go back up as the water rises. But you can fight through successive floors of a skyscraper. But what's really cool about it is that, as well as the environment being dynamic and changing over the course of the level, you also can interact with different parts of it in different ways. So a simple thing would be like if a crate falls on your head as a floor bursts, it gets stuck on your head and then you can't move and for a little while. Or when you, on the level with the helicopter, when you fall down to a floor which is a restaurant, there's tables set up, and on the tables might be a bowl of soup, and you can pick up that bowl of soup and use that as a weapon. And so all the different characters are there's a set of twins as one character, there's one character which is a baboon wearing a top hat, there's
covering all the bases.
There's a James Bond style Jaws character, really super tall and lumbering and stuff like
Overwatch,
that. Plays on all these different 80s kind of action movie tropes. But there's something really fun about one-on-one Super Smash Brothers style battles where the camera zooming in and out as you move across this very large level, but the level is also exploding and the terrain is changing constantly. But also, like an action film, you can pick up elements of the scenery like chairs and balls of soup and use them as your weapons alongside the guns and grenades and rocket launchers and stuff you're also finding.
That's kind of genius. You can imagine an actual Smash Brothers mode kind of ripping on that and doing really well. I used to 'cause I played Golden Axe and that, by the way, bullshit X-Man side-scrolling game when I was on my Amiga, and they're actually just released on the Amiga at that point. So the only time I ever really came across arcades was in like bowling alleys. Whenever I would rarely go bowling, which is the only, apparently in Britain, the only place you'd ever find one.
I think Quasar as well.
Quasar, yeah. I used to play House of the Dead. Anything with guns, basically. Anything that I couldn't have at home, where you didn't have the peripherals in order to make it work, have the novelty value to make it, fun. And House of the Dead was just kind of shocky, but also brilliant reactive zombies that bits would just blow off them when you shot them, and really satisfying. Yeah.
Do you remember all the racing games that were just graphically like a generation ahead of everything else? Like in arcades, it was always stuff. Yeah, Daytona was the one I remember, and there was always like the shit we were playing because we actually liked playing it, and then every now and then they were just like, that racing game, it's got to the point where the racing game looks so much better than everything else that we just have to play it, even though we don't even like racing. We don't really give a shit about actually racing. Yeah. It's like, fuck, Daytona looks so good.
What was the sniper game? Was it Silent Scope or Sniper Scope?
Silent Scope was.
I don't think I ever played that.
That reminds me.
It was brilliant.
There's a huge sniper rifle.
You had it was first of all, it was a huge sniper rifle that was instead of just a pistol like most light gun games now.
I'm with you.
But then you had the screen which showed you your view from the helicopter or whatever, like skyscrapers. But if you looked through the rifle scope, that was a different screen that was actually zoomed in.
So good.
Good.
So you actually played it like an actual sniper.
I've definitely played that.
That was brilliant. I wasted a lot of money on that. And I'm sure it must have been like airports or something, like other than bowling alleys. Airports would be the other
good place for training people to use violence. I was just thinking about like the difference between PC gaming, the sort of state-of-the-art PC gaming versus the average kind of console gaming experience. The differential there has varied wildly over the years. And maybe, like today, it's hard to think of any examples where it's super big because everything's just so designed for consoles. And I think maybe there was a sweet spot around the time Crysis came out where things were still being designed for PCs, and PCs were way ahead of consoles, and so there was just like an experience you could only have on PC, and the PC you needed for it was expensive, and you might not have it. And I feel like there was an opportunity there for arcades to still be a thing. But these days, it's like things are so multi-platform optimized. Everything major budget is always going to be on many platforms, and in order to be on many platforms, it has to run on a fairly decent rig, and so there's not that much point in having a coin-operated arcade. But yeah, I can imagine a Crysis arcade machine existing if arcades had still been a thing when it came out.
I guess, miniaturization has kind of killed it, really, because, in the really old arcades, the fact was that you could actually have the massive microchips and boards in there that would actually drive the game.
So nutty that you'd build a whole machine just to play one game. Like, obviously, they had, common architecture and stuff, but just the idea that, this physical machine just plays Golden Axe. You can't do anything else.
I love it. It's just something kind of beautiful about that.
We need to start working in mega cities. Like the reason that arcades still exist in Tokyo is that it's too expensive for the people who work in Tokyo to live in Tokyo, and so in order for them to get home at night, it's like a 2-hour train ride. And so instead of commuting home right after work, they often stay in town and meet friends, or they have dinner and then they go back to the office, or they go and play arcade games and then go back to the office.
If only it were too expensive for us to go home after work in Bath. If only we had to abandon our home lives.
Then you would have DDR booths everywhere.
Cabra O'Donnell writes... Wait, am I reading the right question? No, let's read Daniel Gracian's question first. He writes, Dear Crick and Crowbar, I'm sending this on the 18th, which is my birthday. I'd like to try to get into the real-time strategy genre, and I'd like to know if you guys could recommend a good RTS game for someone who has no previous experience in the genre. Keep crowbarring those crates. I would say, my favourite RTS is still Supreme Commander 1. But your starting RTS should not be that. I feel like Warcraft 3 is probably the best.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's
intro, because it's a really good RTS in itself. Like, it's a thing that even after all the many RTSs I've played, I still want to play that one. and it's also very story driven. It's like it takes you through, it has 4 different campaigns, but they are linked by a single story, so that you play as the humans first, and then like the transition from playing humans to undead happens when the human person you're playing as becomes undead. Like, that's why you're playing as the undead now, is because you fucking died. And that transition is actually really good, like plot wise. There was one of the few times when you switch allegiances in the game, and I was with it. I was like, before I was on that side, and after the switch I was like, okay, yeah, I'm on that side now. I like Dawn of War is a good.
Dawn of War 1 is good. I think World in Conflict might be a really good starter, because there's no base building or any of that faffing, no resource gathering. You don't have many units to control, but you still get the sense of kind of impact and kind of pretty things exploding. And it's got a surprisingly good story campaign. It's slightly ashamed that it's like a guilty pleasure of mine. That's that single player campaign, World of Conflict, if you can find it.
Yeah, that's a good show.
Crowbar O'Donnell writes, "Hi guys, love the podcast. Perfect dog walking material. My question relates to the different philosophies on reviewing games and review scores. The two giants of PC gaming have different approaches. There is the what I think method of rock, paper, shotgun.
Yay.
I am a supporter," he writes in brackets,
Yay!
where no score is given, and PC gamers' more traditional approach. I subscribe to the mag, he writes in brackets,
Hooray!
which gives a review score. As you guys work for both, I was wondering what your views are on the two different approaches, advantages, disadvantages, etc. And then I think that's his whole email. Oh no. Well, okay, it's another question, but let's answer that one first.
Review scores on PC Gamer at least are just a thing our readers specifically really expect. Like, if we would just stop doing review scores, people would fucking flip out. And it's just people would think we weren't doing our jobs if we didn't put a number on the end of the thing. And we do have like quite tight defined brackets for it now, and we take it seriously. But a personal disappointment of mine is that the review score dominates the debate. Like, when people comment on our reviews, it's almost always about the score. It's like, oh my god, how can I get this? And the kind of scoring system people have in their heads is just different to our actual scoring system that we have laid out, and all those misconceptions.
Some of them think you start with 100 and then deduct points.
Yeah,
like, if you give it 96, like, what were the 4 points for? Why did you deduct the 4 points?
So many things. And also they think that, an 8 means one thing to them, and it means a different thing to someone else, and a 6 means something else. And it's just so subjective, and it just becomes a pointless, almost, it's not a semantic argument, but it's an argument along pointless, arbitrary lines, where what it really is just a really short term. It's next to a verdict, and there's a verdict and there's a score, and it lets you set, as a magazine, kind of set a strata of games and kind of position them against one another in the time in which you're reviewing. So maybe an session will score higher than Civ in this year, or maybe like one shooter will score better than another shooter, and it gives you a slight kind of slightly contextualizes the entire gaming landscape that you're actually reviewing at the time. The trouble is that the big problem with scores is that they've become a business metric through Metacritic. And actually there are studios that give people bonuses based on a Metacritic score that their games get.
I know of PRs who only get their bonuses based on Metacritic scores, which is remarkable because they don't have any influence on the game itself. They're only responsible for how it's presented, and still their salary is based on what Metacritic score the game itself gets.
And Metacritic is just such an absurd. Like, I could rant all day about Metacritic. The people it's not the fault of people who created Metacritic, because they didn't know that this would happen. They didn't know that suddenly companies would, CEOs and executives would try and use this as a metric by which to pay and rate their own staff. But that's what it is now. But it's such a flawed thing, because one site will rate out of 5, another site will rate out of 10. We rate out of 100, and in that environment, if you were starting again like RPS did a few years back, why would you bother with all that shit?
So, Graham, do you find that because you've abandoned scores that all of your comments are perfectly civil and nobody has a big disagreement?
Yeah, and everyone just agrees and hugs and
everyone reads the text thoroughly
and
and fully considers the points presented.
I just want people to talk about the game and not the score, or what the reviewers' thoughts are. To actually talk about what's in the game and what games are.
See, I quite like scores, and when I worked at PC Gamer, I defended them a lot because I think the conversation around them, even though it can be quite silly, that silliness can be fun. And I think people, comments often go bad when they get taken too seriously. And I completely agree with you that there's something valuable about the way that they help individual magazines or websites build a kind of personal canon of what that magazine or website cares about, and you can get a very clear reading of that from the scores. What I think the value is in not using them is that very often if you've got a score at the end of the piece of writing, in part because the comments are going to focus on it so strongly, but it warps what you choose to write about in the text of the piece. It has an impact there, in so much as partly what the job of the text becomes is justifying the score that's going to appear at the end, and that appearance of we are giving a single authoritative metric of whether this game is good or not also causes reviews to have to cover the bases, basically, to talk about games in their totality and what all the good points and all the bad points and form a cohesive argument, when often I don't think that's the most interesting way to approach games. And certainly when PC Gamer already does it, GameSpot does it, IGN does it, everyone fucking does it the same way. You don't need another website that does the same thing. And not having a score, what it often allows you to do is approach a review of a game and only talk about the things that are actually interesting about it. You don't have to spend, if you're, a paragraph talking about the sound, as GameSpot and IGN will almost do, if the sound is just fine and it's unremarkable and you didn't notice it when you were playing it. But similarly, you don't necessarily have to explain every single mechanic and provide some judgment of it. There are other websites that do that, like PC Gamer and GameSpot and IGN, but by not having a score, you can say, actually, these two ideas are what's interesting about this thing. Let's focus on those ideas and pull them apart. And that's the thing you get a lot in criticism or film criticism or, literature criticism and that sort of stuff that doesn't tend to happen a lot in games. Like if you read a film review in The New Yorker, it will be significantly different from the total film review of the same film, because the author of the New Yorker review will just pull out a couple of ideas that they personally find interesting and explore them. And through that, you can still get a sense of whether the author enjoyed the film or what might be in it that might want you to go and watch it. You don't need to have it be this almost scientific breakdown of every part of it.
I think that the formal review approach that like PC Gamer is going to be a mainstream entity is a part of it. It's the idea that we should come away with an idea of what the game is and an idea of what the reviewer thinks of it as two separate things. Whereas they will recognise what a reviewer thinks of things and they disagree with them, but still know that there's value in the game because they recognise what the game is described will have value to them. So I think that formal way of reviewing things can be a bit like, we'd never say, the GameSpot thing of giving graphics
a separate rating to the other stuff,
like being that that kind of close to it. I mean, even in the writing, like I didn't talk about the sound in my Assassin's Creed Unity review because, as you say, it was fine. I just talked about the things that worked and didn't work, but it felt like I had to cover all the bases, as you say. But I kind of think it's cool that someone could read my review and perhaps have a different taste in games than I do, but still read my review and understand what that game is and still know that they would like it, even if I disagreed with it and give it a lesser score. I think that's the thing, especially with Assassin's Creed, where there are parts of it that if you just love, like I said earlier, if you love game worlds, then it will be an 80 for you. It's that sense, I want someone to come away with it and know that is an 80 for them. And
I think that scores are of more value the more time you spent immersed in the score culture. Like if you know what a 70 is and you know what an 80 is and you know what a 90 is from a particular publication, then them telling you that is really important. Because I used to work with Graham, as we all did, at PC Gamer, and when someone was reviewing a game at PC Gamer, we would ask them, in order to get their first impressions, we would say, "Oh, what do you think you're giving it? Like, just roughly, what ballpark are you thinking of?" And so when Graham tells me he's like reviewing something, or is what I thinking something, I always ask him instinctively, "What are you going to give it?" And then he tells me, "We don't give scores." Oh yeah, but still, what would you? What would it be? What is the actual score? So I'm always looking for that as like I just want this summary judgment of like I know what the good things are and I know what the bad things are, but overall, what is the sort of rough idea of how essential is it that I play this thing? And I still go to that, but it only works if you know the person and if you know
the culture.
And that's like what we tried to cultivate. What we tried to cultivate at PC Gamer. I should try and use the past tense because I don't work there anymore. In terms of like. It wasn't that we were trying to give scores that would any stranger could come up with and totally understand what we meant by it.
Yeah.
It was that I hope if you've read 10 Richard Cobbett reviews and Richard Cobbett gives something 85%, you know what that means. You know that if you agree with him on everything, then that is a big deal and you will buy that game.
I think that's just lost on the internet. That's one of the big things that's happened.
Yeah, that's caused a lot of the disagreement over it.
I mean, like, PC Games just transitioned onto the internet in a big way fairly recently, to be honest. And that's been one of the big things where, the mag culture, we're very serious about preserving that, but as soon as you put it online, the commenters don't know.
Yeah. And of course, inevitably the comparisons start between, this reviewer gave this game 90%, and you're saying that game's better than this other game that you only gave 91%?
Endless, and that's just so tedious, and just it's not good for anyone.
I think if PC Gamer didn't exist, or score reviews didn't exist, I would create them, because I think it's important that they do exist. But it's not so much... Like, I know that PC Gamer wouldn't do a paragraph that's specifically about sound in the way that IGN might, but I think sometimes... Given that the PC Gamer review exists, I wish that there were other reviews that were just like, you know what, I'm just a guy who fucking loves game worlds, and I'm just going to write a review which is entirely from that point of view.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need every single review to say, the game world is the best thing about this. Here's 2 paragraphs about that, but then I have to spend the rest of my word count talking about all the other elements of the game, because there's a number at the end. And if there's a disconnect and I just spend 800 words raving about how cool the game world is and then give it 5 out of 10, you're going to want to know why, and I'm going to have to justify that. And we don't have enough of that specialist stuff. Like,
that's really
specialists in music creating, or like, you get poptinists that are just really fucking love upbeat pop music made by manufactured girl bands, and they'll just rave about that. Or the NME has a very particular style and approach to music and music reviews, and it doesn't mean that they only write about a particular kind of music, but you know what an NME band is, what the kind of stuff they put on the cover, and when they cover other types of things, it's often to define themselves by what they hate and kicking the shit out of it. On video games, we tend to be split along platforms, so you get 360 website, PC website, PlayStation website, or magazines before that, but the same games get released across the board, and I wish there were more specialists that are just, I really like guns. Like, lots of games have guns in.
Yeah.
Why isn't there a specialist games website that just judges games based on the quality of their guns?
I feel like there are a lot of specialists, but we don't have that same acceptance of the specialists that the music industry does. Like, when you say people know what an NME album is, that's probably true, but there isn't. People don't know what a PC Gamer game is. People don't know what an RPS game is. People don't know what an IGN game is. They just... If their game that they like isn't rated well by one of those publications, no matter which one it is, they will fucking flip out. What the fuck are you thinking? Yeah. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come to your home and murder you in your sleep for thinking that. I mean, maybe that happens in music as well. I guess I haven't paid that much attention to music criticism and the reaction to it.
I think music people define their own identities or kind of perform identities by liking certain bands, and that doesn't exist in the same way with games. Or if it does, it's kind of manipulated by marketing more than music. So this especially played out during the console wars when the PS3 and the Xbox 360 went up against each other. Like, the console wars. Like, what an absurd fucking term.
It's like vinyl versus
That
tape.
is, yeah, exactly.
That was never a fight.
Like, what's the
Music
fucking
industry.
philosophy there? Two corporate entities releasing products. It's not like music where this thing stands for, real, for ideas about life and the world that I believe in, and this other band doesn't. It's like, this product and corporation, I've decided to somehow, staple my identity to this corporate mass for no reason.
I bought this object, and if the things that are coming out for this object are good, then my decision was wise, and if they're not, then it's bad.
Yeah.
So I have to defend it to make it look like it was wise.
Yeah, so that's like the divisions are there. That's how base the divisions are in video games, were anyway. I think the kind of console war stuff is just old hat now, really. But we don't worry about it because we love PC games. Who gets PC games?
Quite so.
We're all about immersive sims versus linear FPSs. Fuck those
Fuck
guys.
those linear FPSs. Unless, apart from Tom, who quite enjoys them.
Sometimes.
I like a bit of COD sometimes, yeah.
I mean, Latest God was the first one I've liked in a while.
It does have lasers.
Yeah. Odward Fenry writes, 1212 and through, the Vorpal bar went snicker snants. The crew did think and have a drink for Ludo narrative dissonant. I feel like that's leaning towards dissonance.
He ran out of characters.
Therefore, we
this
must
is
drink.
This is a Twitter question.
I don't have an answer for that. I just read it. That was the thing.
Yeah, to explain that, the Twitter call for questions today was a bastardised verse from Jabberwocky, and that was a response call. They ran out of characters.
Will Shinmeyer asks, Jabberwocky, this raises the question, what are the best surreal games? Which have the craziest worlds? I have a good answer to this, except Pathologic, which I haven't really played. But I gather that's a good surreal game.
The Void. I always say The Void.
Same developer, right?
This comes up, yeah. Icepick Lodge, the developer. The Void is an extraordinarily strange, grey, horrible, disgusting world, which is magnificent. And if you like worlds and feeling uncomfortable and kind of itchy all over when you're in them, then try The Void.
I mean, I would say, Proteus, I think, counts as a very surreal world that's really engaging. It's not... So, the off-putting thing about a lot of surreal worlds or things that are lauded as surreal is often that they are defying your ability to appreciate them. They're always whatever you think you want to get from a traditional form of media, we're going to defy that and not supply you that and make it obtuse and difficult to understand and rebel against that. Whereas Proteus, I think, is just very different to other games. It's not trying to, screw you over. It's not trying to say, you can't have this experience. It's just, it's a musical, ambient thing where you walk around, and the way you walk around and what you walk to changes the music around you in a really affecting and interesting way. And if, to the point where even if you walk away from everything you see and just walk out into the sea and just walk towards the sun, that is an amazing musical experience. It will create a really interesting track that is just different to everything else you'll experience in that game. And that's a game that I feel like is very surreal, but it's not constructed to intentionally defy your expectations. It's just creating a really interesting interactive experience that is unlike other things. I was put off it for a while because I thought it was going to be a kind of intentionally artsy kind of I don't know, just I thought it was going to be an authored experience, and it was going to be we're not going to do an FPS, we're going to do this special art installation that's going to unfold this one particular way that we've decided is the most artistically impactful way. And the reason I loved it in the end was that it wasn't that. It was very interactive, and it was very to do with everything I did was driving the music, and the music was the whole point of the whole thing. And I found myself changing what I did in order to create different pieces of music that I was interested in.
Yeah, I had to review that, and again, go back to the flaws with scores. How the fuck do you put a number on that? It's I had the same experience, but plans to be shorter and slightly less satisfying. But yeah, I don't know about surrealism. It's you could quote Xenoclash as an obvious example of a strange world that just isn't like anything else. But I think surrealism to me should be slightly disturbing. It should be something that uproots or subverts things you see every day in a way that scares or kind of makes things odd and kind of jars with your perception of reality. And I've not played it yet, but there's a game based on kind of Ballardian modernism that's kind of about... it's kind of a stealth game where you can see people's thoughts in the air and take the words from the air and kind of apply them to the environment to change it.
What's it called?
And I really can't remember the name of it.
Is that the one with the really intricate, colourful, beautiful art style?
Not Tangiers?
Tangiers.
Okay, that's it.
Which is, in fact, completely grayscale and dark.
It's a different one from the one I was thinking
Okay,
of.
I think I know what you might be thinking of, actually. But yes, Tangiers is a really good example of that. What were you talking about, Graham?
I don't remember its name.
Again,
Wait, you don't
Another
know.
stealth thing about... Stealth.
Oh, heat extinguisher.
Yeah, that one.
of course. Surreal spaceships in space. Yeah, we'll never know what that is. We'll try and recover it.
Yeah, I saw a image from Tangiers recently that was just like a lady with a television head. That was it. Television head, I think, was showing static.
I think that's been on a few album covers. Like,
Yeah, that's...
that one's an old recycled image, but generally it's quite oppressive and monstrous.
Yeah, that's cool. And that is the end of our podcast for this week.
It's all the time we have time for.
You can write us questions at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can post questions on our forum at crateandcrowbar.com/forum. And you can tweet us questions at crateandcrowbar on Twitter. Also on Twitter, I am at Pentadact, PENTADACT. Graham is...
At Gonnas, Gonnas.
And Tom is...
At PCG Ludo, which is Ludio.